Naruto x Lotm, A Fool's Errand. Author. Hoin_Kyoma. Chapter 1-20. He is coming today, isn't he? Garde spoke while biting on a stalk of weed. He is. I've heard plenty about him. I mean, it's a surprise in and of itself that the nobility of the Land of Fire allowed him to go on this excursion. Yeah, I heard he wanted to learn more about the people by spending time with them. Fit, you can't seriously have believed that. I mean, what else could it be? The daimyo wouldn't have left any important matters to him yet just because he was declared a genius during his childhood, right? No way. I heard that the boy was proliferating his own religion at such a young age. He claimed to be the blessed one of a long-lost god. Probably a fraud like the cult of Jashin. Who knows? You're right, who knows what goes on in the minds of those noble people sitting there and commanding the lives of us fools. True. By the way, the next time you go to the Hokage Tower, could you ask the receptionist if I can take her out for dinner tonight? What makes you think she'll accept this time? Clop clop clop. The sound of wooden sandals hitting the hard road was heard from a distance. The guards subconsciously straightened their postures in anticipation of the person who was going to walk over to them. Walking over the hill was a small boy, aged about 12, as he walked toward the rather grand entrance of the village. The young boy had shabby black hair, wore a blue kimono and held a topaz silver pendulum that was wrapped around his wrist. His eyes, however, were a striking blue that appeared deep enough to suck one's soul away if stared at long enough. The boy's face looked masculine with a touch of femininity that gave him a graceful feel. There were no blemishes or scars anywhere visible, which also hinted that the boy was of high stature. The boy had on his head a straw hat to keep away the heat of the sun as he walked with steady steps and reached the gate. Halt! Guard A said as he stepped closer to the boy and placed his hand in his path. The boy, a little surprised, looked at the guard and spoke with some respect. Yes, mister. How may I help you? Name, identification and reason to visit Konoha. Guard B said, walking over to the boy. Ah, my name's Tachibana Rei. As for identification, well, would it be alright to say I have none? But I think your Hokage should know me. And for my reason to visit Konoha. Let's say fate has directed me to be here. The boy made eye contact with the guard, which unsettled him in some way. His collar suddenly felt tight and he felt vulnerable, as if he had been completely seen through. But he had a job to do and wouldn't be scared by just any little boy claiming to be a friend of the Hokage. You cannot enter Konoha without identification. Sorry, but those are the rules. Guard B said, since Guard A was quiet for some reason. But if you could just ask the Hokage, he'd let you know I'm not lying. After all, a seer has no reason to profit from lies. It goes against fate. Ray answered cryptically. The two guards looked at him before Guard A asked, are you the son of the daimyo? A smile blossomed on Ray's face as he nodded softly, yes. But I have long since given up that identity. I want to live with the people and learn more about them. I also hope to bring them to see who is their true Lord and Savior. Guard A frowned, but Guard B spoke, we will verify that for you. But while we do that, could you please remain here? The boy looked a little disappointed about the delay, but he nodded and allowed the guards to do their work. Guard A left the gate, leaving Ray with Guard B. What happened to your escorts? Were you attacked? The guard asked. Ray shook his head with a soft smile as he looked above and said, it was all by the will of the Lord that I arrived at Konoha safe and sound without any mishaps. Fate did not intend me to be entangled with troubles. The guard became confused but nodded nevertheless. He'd met too many crackpots during his time as a guard, so he said nothing else. Suddenly, the guard saw Ray let go of his pendant and allow it to still before his head tilted backwards and his eyes rolled into his head. The boy murmured something, but the guard couldn't quite catch what he was speaking. After a few seconds, the boy opened his eyes, looking normal before he looked at the pendant that was now rapidly spinning clockwise. The boy frowned and looked at the guard with a little bit of pity, before he spoke kindly, I hope you are able to stay calm through the adversities you shall face today. The guard became stunned but didn't overextend his thoughts. Instead, he opted to believe the boy was not right in the head. The other guard soon arrived and bowed to the child with a smile. Greetings, Tachibana-san. I hope you have a pleasant stay during your time in Konoha. Rei nodded politely and passed through the checkpoint to finally enter Konoha. Something he'd dreamed of doing for long. As Rei entered Konoha, however, Guard A turned to Guard B and spoke softly, "The receptionist declined your invitation. She escalated the issue with her manager, who told me to inform you that you'll be getting a pay cut for this month. And if you keep trying to score with the receptionist, you could even lose your job." Guard B's mouth hung loose and then he sighed and looked at the sky, pondering about the words of the young boy he'd seen just now. "Well, at least it's nothing too big. The boy was looking at me like I'd eaten shit." Cock. Asterisk squeak. Gulp. A bird flew by, startling Guard B, who was looking at the sky. He inadvertently gulped out of shock, but his timing was wrong since the bird emptied its stomach at the same time. Guard A at this moment looked at his friend who was on the ground and trying to spit out whatever he had swallowed with some pity. Damn. Waiting in the reception of the Hokage office, Tachibana looked around at the various murals and paintings on the walls that described various key moments in the history of the formation of Konoha. Most of them he knew, but a few described things he was learning for the first time, such as the third Hokage being the strongest shinobi ever. More like luckiest Hokage ever. Tachibana closed his eyes and relaxed into his chair as he entered cogitation and remembered the scenario he'd come across when he'd first been transmigrated into this world. Tachibana was just a normal 13-year-old child in his past life. His days were mostly spent in school, where he had several friends who he'd annoy or have fun with. He had a crush and he hated math with passion like any other. He'd come home and quickly finish his homework under his loving mother's supervision and then spend all the rest of his time reading web novels, watching anime, or playing some online games with his friends. It was a life most would kill to have. It was a perfect life. Tachibana had no troubles, no unfulfilled wishes, no bullies or gangsters. It was a great life. Happy birthday for the last time, fam. Friend A spoke, giving Tachibana a fist bump as they walked out of class. "You don't know how jealous I am of you," Friend B said with a dramatic flair as he spilt water on his face to pretend to be crying. "Come on dude, it's just a trip to Snow World. It's not Disneyland," Tachibana argued back with a light smile. "But dude, it's so hot. It's like 50 degrees over here. My mum hates it when I turn down the temp on the thermostat." Friend B cried out while fanning himself. "Sigh, just use a table fan then. Huh? And get tinnitus." "No thanks. Come on dude, don't be such a wuss. No one gets tinnitus because of the sound of a table fan." "No way, Ray. Mom said that's what happens and she's never been wrong before." All the friends around Tachibana shook their heads and continued to walk out of the school gates. "Do you guys want me to bring you something from Snow World?" Tachibana asked, but before he could hear anyone's response he suddenly found himself floating in the air. "I'm floating. Tachibana barely glanced behind himself and found a random person completely unrelated to him had pushed him onto the road. And before he lost consciousness, all Tachibana remembered was seeing two bright lights head in his direction. Tachibana regained consciousness while he was trapped. He couldn't move his arms or legs. He couldn't move his head or even his eyes. He couldn't even breathe on his own. Even worse was that someone was doing all the moving for him. Someone was deciding where he'd look and when he'd breathe. But the worst part was the pain. In Tachibana's vision was a hand he didn't recognize. The hand had torn right through his chest and was holding his still beating heart outside. "What is this? Where am I?" Tachibana tried looking around, but he couldn't. All he could feel was terrible pain, both mental and physical. The closest Tachibana could describe the pain he was feeling was like someone had gripped his heart and smashed it into 1,000 bloody pieces. Mentally, he felt like he'd failed himself. What is this strange feeling? This disappointment? This feeling of powerlessness? As if hearing his questions, the body he was in spoke, "This cough is your true face." The man behind him twitched a little in surprise and expressed it in his words, "I'm surprised you're still alive, Tachibana-kun. I'd thought you were a capable puppet, never thought you'd be this capable." Tachibana. Me. Suddenly the body he was possessing spit blood. "It looks like your time is up," the voice said with an extremely giddy tone. Suddenly Tachibana heard a voice inside his head. If only I could do it all over again. If only I'd seen through his schemes earlier. Would I have been able to save them all? A searing sense of pain and loss took over Tachibana's senses and he fell unconscious once again. The next time Tachibana regained his consciousness was when he was in the body of an 11-year-old pissing his pants during the night. It is as they say, pissing in a dream feels more real than real. But the reason why Tachibana hadn't stopped wetting his bed even after he'd realized what he was doing was because he was stunned by what was in front of him. Host found. Closing square bracket. Initializing, Lord of the Mysteries, system. Closing square bracket. System initialized. Closing square bracket. Congrats to the host for awakening the Lord of the Mysteries system. Host has a novice starter gift pack, would you like to open it? Closing square bracket. What? Tachibana was absolutely dumbfounded. He cried for a few weeks about it. He'd just been plucked out of his world and dropped into one he didn't want to be in at all. And the worst part was there seemed to be no way for him to go back. Why me? There are several other people who'd kill to be in my position. Why me? It took a while but Tachibana eventually got over it and forced himself to look ahead at what he'd gotten. Given how he'd been given an opportunity that very few were given, he wanted to make the most of it. He finally opened the novice gift package and as a part of it got the Seer potion along with several starter materials for rituals and such. It was also where he got his topaz crystal silver pendulum. He'd also spent time learning about his identity by consuming the memories of the original person in his body had left behind. He was the only son of the daimyo of the Land of Fire and was in the Naruto world. Ever since then, Tachibana had begun acting as a seer to digest his potion. Obviously, this meant Tachibana had taken on a unique character that did not sit well with the daimyo and his wife. But he did it anyway since the faint dream he'd seen after he died and before he was reborn had instilled a deep sense of fear towards the future in him. Although he didn't know for sure, he felt like if he allowed that moment to happen again he'd regret it even more than the man in his dream from before. And so, to digest his potion by acting as a seer since he could still lose control, Tachibana had to constantly be among the masses. Attempting divination for several things from what to plant this season for maximum profit to things like where a new shop should be opened to bring the best performance and ambience. This made him quite popular with the people such that several people arrived at the capital only to seek out his divination. Of course, Tachibana also performed regular divinations for his father about the reliability of various court ministers and such, but his father didn't want to depend on it very much since if word got out it would put Tachibana in a lot of unneeded danger. Eventually, however, with the fear in his heart about the future only growing stronger, Tachibana performed a divination to see where he should go to get stronger in the fastest possible way. And the answer was Konoha. And here he was, waiting in the Hokage's reception hall for a chance to meet him as arranged by his father the daimyo. A sharp knock on a table woke Tachibana up from his daydreams as the receptionist spoke after seeing he was paying attention to her. "You may go in now. The Hokage is waiting for you." Tachibana nodded and spoke with a happy tone, "Thank you, sis." The receptionist, old enough to be his mom, shook her head and went back to doing her work calmly as Tachibana pushed the door and entered the Hokage's office. "Welcome to Konoha, Tachibana-kun." The polite, sagely old man with a goatee and a smoking pipe in his hands, Hiruzen Sarutobi, greeted calmly. Tachibana gave him a short nod with only a few polite words, "I'm happy to be here, Hokage-sama." He didn't bow towards him not because of any personal likes or dislikes about him based on the show, but because of his position as the daimyo's heir. If Tachibana bowed to him it would be like saying that the daimyo was lower than the Hokage in stature when it was generally considered to be the opposite by the public. "I'm glad you're happy. May I know about your perspective on the life of Shinobi Tachibana-kun?" Tachibana was a little surprised by the direct question, but he responded nonetheless. "I haven't interacted much with the lives of shinobi as I've lived in the capital all my life. But from what I've observed when my father had the 12 guardian ninjas is that they're all duty-bound and have ideals they aspire to make true in the world." Hiruzen closed his eyes and breathed out some smoke from his nostrils as if in deep thought about what Tachibana had just said. He slowly opened his eyes and nodded. True. Duty-bound and ideals. They are words even I would use to describe shinobi who are part of the cream of the crop. But I would also like to add something else. Tachibana raised his eyebrows, and what would that be, Hokage-sama? Tenacity, or their ability to repeatedly stand up after being knocked down. There was a short silence as Tachibana mulled over the Hokage's words and Hiruzen inhaled smoke from his pipe. Before Tachibana could speak, however, Hiruzen continued, I want you to know these three terms, Tachibana-kun. They are what encompass the life of a truly great shinobi. Only by knowing the core of these three words will you be able to understand us. Ah, I see, so he's worried that I'm spying on them for Dad and will probably tell him something strange which might impact them negatively. Tachibana nodded and spoke to quell Hiruzen's worries. Worry not, Hokage-sama. I will only make any conclusions about the world of those that protect us from the shadows when I've truly qualified to be one of them. Hiruzen smiled at that and nodded. He tapped his pipe on the table to clear the ash that had formed in it a little and then spoke calmly. I suppose you'll be needing a teacher to help you become a shinobi. Tachibana nodded. If it isn't too much trouble, I'd like you to assign someone to help me begin walking on this path. Haha, I appreciate your humbleness, Tachibana-kun. I will assign you to someone who can help you become your very best. Hiruzen said with a smile. Tachibana nodded once again and Hiruzen pressed a button on his table. I've called someone to take you to your residence during your stay here at Konoha. I hope you're satisfied by the comfort. Although we cannot match the royal palace, we've done our best. Tachibana smiled and nodded politely. I will be in your care then, Hokage-sama. Just then there was a knock on the door and Hiruzen spoke out loud, come in. Tachibana turned around to see a man wearing nose sunglasses peek inside and then walk in after Hiruzen nodded. You called for me, Hokage-sama? The man asked after kneeling on the floor. Hiruzen spoke happily, could you direct Tachibana-kun here to the residence I had you prepare earlier, Ebisu? Yes. Hokage-sama. Consider the job done. Ebisu then stood up and bowed politely towards Tachibana and spoke calmly, could you please follow me, Tachibana-san? Tachibana nodded and began to follow Ebisu out of the room. Right as he fully stepped out, however, Tachibana turned back towards Hiruzen and spoke in a tone that was as calm as a lake reflecting the sky in it. Although your health will give you as long as you've lived, a mistake from the past that occurred due to your strength will hunt you down sooner than later. With those words, before Hiruzen could respond or stop him, Tachibana left the room and shut the door behind him. Hiruzen was frozen in his seat as he looked at the spot Tachibana had just been standing at while speculating about what Tachibana had just said. A mistake from the past that occurred due to my strength. Aren't there several of them? I heard he was a fortune teller, so why's he giving out such ominous predictions? Isn't that bad for business? Hopefully, his reports to the daimyo don't affect the already tight finances of Konoha. If things keep going as they are, I will have to kick out several shinobi who work in the management department. Wait, can't I just cut finances to Danzo? He'll try to dance on my head for the pay cut, but I guess he can earn them through other means. Might as well kick out a few of the shinobi in the management department after the Chunin exams. There are too many of Tsunade's bills that I have to settle. Too bad I sold away all the Senju properties to fund Danzo's weird experiments. Who'd have thought even after growing up so much Tsunade would still be so fervent with her gambling? Tisk. If only she didn't gamble so much, Konoha's finances would be in the green. As Hiruzen complained about various things, Tachibana had reached the home on the outskirts of a lush forest. Here's the assigned home, Tachibana-san. Should you need help with anything, please send a message to the Hokage Tower and I'll be at the provided location. Thank you, Ebisu-san. Tachibana said with a soft smile as he nodded at Ebisu. I hope you enjoy your stay, Tachibana-san. And with a puff of smoke, Ebisu vanished from his spot. Tachibana looked at the door of his new house and found that it was marked with a symbol. A symbol that he recognized easily. Is this a home in the Senju territory they repurposed for me? Tachibana then opened the door and entered inside. Quite clean. Since he was quite tired from walking around all day, Tachibana entered the bath to relax his muscles. Inside the bath, Tachibana clicked his molars twice to activate spirit vision. About 3 shinobi keeping a constant watch. Is it for my safety or to keep track of my actions? After confirming there was no one inside the house though, Tachibana called out for the system inside his mind. Status. Name. Tachibana Rei. Age. 12. Sequence. 9. Seer. Digestion. 99%. Beyander skills. Tarodman C. Spirit pendulum divination, dowsing rod seeking, dream divination, spirit numerology, astromancy method, astrolabe divination, ritualistic magic. Looking at the 99% digestion percentage, Tachibana closed his eyes and began to consolidate all the rules of being a seer that he'd practiced himself over the last few months. A seer possesses reverence toward fate. To help others interpret revelations and guide them in a better direction, yet constantly maintain one's fear and respect towards fate. One cannot be too egoistical, too proud, or blindly believe one's interpretations. Divination isn't all-powerful. Suddenly Tachibana felt an egg crack inside himself. It felt as if he'd been reunited with something he'd long missed. He suddenly felt whole and full. Opening his eyes, Tachibana's eyes came upon the notification that had popped up in front of him. Congratulations, the host has completely digested the Seer potion. Closing square bracket. Would host like to consume the sequence 8, clown potion? Closing square bracket. Yes, no. Tachibana mentally tapped yes and found a small glass flask teleported into his hands. He examined the liquid that looked like sunset had been trapped in a bottle and was filled with clouds of bubbles and fizz. After he was satisfied with what he saw, he immediately gulped the entire contents of the small glass flask. He felt his body bubble and boil, but Tachibana expertly used cogitation to calm his spirit body and allow the potion to be fully absorbed by his body. Once he was done, Tachibana stepped out of the bath and stood on the tiled floor by balancing his entire body on the tip of his toe. He felt clear-headed and light. He felt like there would be no posture where he couldn't easily maintain his balance. Coming out of his acrobatic posture, Tachibana thought about the new knowledge about hardening paper that had entered his mind. I'll test the paper throwing ability tomorrow. I'm tired right now and want to sleep. After drying himself, Tachibana went to the bedroom, turned off the lights and fell asleep quickly after wearing the clothes he was provided. The scent of jasmine. Whoever used to sleep here before probably smelt nice. Waking up the next morning, Tachibana freshened himself before using spirit vision to casually count the numbers of shinobi on patrol around his house. 3 like yesterday. They're not worried about me that much, I guess. Hopefully, Danzo doesn't try and do something silly. Tachibana then went around the house, exploring to see everything it had to offer. A bathroom on both floors with the top one having a washing machine, a bedroom on both floors, a wide living room on the ground floor and a smaller one on the first floor. On the first floor, there's also a room filled with various books explaining the history of the village and its occupants. No jutsus though. A kitchen to cook food for myself that currently does not have any ingredients. It is however well equipped technologically with a refrigerator, an exhaust, a stove, and a dishwasher. There's no TV though. Well, not like there were any shows in it that I liked watching very much. And given how much I will have to train to catch up with the other shinobi, I don't think I'll even have much time to watch anything else. Let's test that paper throwing skill I gained after becoming a sequence 8 clown. Tachibana used his Beyander skills by expending his spiritual energy directly. He didn't use Chakra, which was made from a mixing spiritual and physical energies. He currently didn't even know how to knead Chakra and needed someone to teach him about it. After all, it was simple to say how he could mix 2 different energies and end up with a third, but he didn't know how to extract or work with physical energy in the first place. He could feel his spirituality immediately after becoming a Beyander, and Beyander abilities like divination didn't take up any physical energy, so he was left hanging on that front. Grabbing a page from an old book in the small library of books the house had, Tachibana focused his spirituality into the paper and caused it to harden. He examined it for a bit and ended up with a shallow cut on his finger by running it along its edge. Then with a simple flick of his wrist, he caused the paper to fly and embed itself into the wooden pillar of the long-standing traditional Senju house. A paper cut. Should I name this move, paper cutter? Meh. Didn't that girl, what was her name, Conan, have a Kekkei Genkei based on papers too? After Tachibana finished launching papers from various angles and created several scratches on the pillar he was experimenting on, he heard a soft knock. Someone's here. Ebisu. To show me around the village or something. Tachibana walked to the entrance and placed his hand on the doorknob to open it, but froze. A vision had struck and left him a little confused and possibly bamboozled. Who's this man? Why is he wearing a walk on his back along with a ladle? Seeing the man didn't appear threatening, and was smiling and radiating positivity, Tachibana let his topaz pendulum slip out of his wrist as he performed a simple divination by using cogitation to force himself into a clear-minded state. The man outside is a danger to me. Tachibana repeated the sentence 7 times and after he was done, opened his eyes calmly to see that the pendulum was spinning counterclockwise. So he's fine. Well, you can never be too careful. Tachibana nodded and finally opened the door with a similar smile. Hello, mister. The man's smile widened when he saw Tachibana and spoke calmly but confidently. Hello Tachibana-sama, my name is Kausuke Maruboshi, also known as the Eternal Genin of Konoha. I've come here on the Hokage's orders. I have been ordered to escort you around the village and if possible teach you about the ways of the shinobi. Ah, I think I remember something about there being an Eternal Genin or something in the show. Was he a filler character or something? Tachibana nodded and spoke politely. I'm not one to stand on formalities. It is all right for you to call me with the prefix, san, Maruboshi-san. Maruboshi nodded and spoke with a smile. I shall do so then, Tachibana-san. Maruboshi-san, is it possible that we buy a few cooking ingredients along the way? I've just checked the kitchen and it's rather lacking. Ah, that might have been a mistake on our part, I'm sorry. Don't worry, I don't mind. And I like to pick my ingredients by myself. So is it possible? Yes, surely it is. Tachibana nodded and then asked, so when do we leave? Now's good. All right. Please lead the way. Tachibana said, grabbing the keys hanging by the door as he walked out of the house to lock it behind him while strolling towards the village with Maruboshi. Their conversation until they reached the village was a quiet one with very few words exchanged. It was only when they reached a street with a particularly appetizing fragrance that Maruboshi spoke to Tachibana. Tachibana-san, since you're probably hungry, why don't we start our trip with breakfast at the best ramen place in all of Konoha? Tachibana wanted to deny but his stomach made an odd rumbling sound, making him embarrassed and automatically deciding for him, I shall impose on you then. Well, nothing wrong with having breakfast at the place Naruto found it best. Stepping inside the Ichiraku ramen store, Maruboshi and Tachibana found themselves a seat as Maruboshi ordered for them, my recommendation, miso ramen. It simply tastes fantabulous. To which Tachibana just nodded. Coming right up, Tyuki said looking at the duo. While he recognized Maruboshi, he failed to recognize Tachibana. New here? Tyuki asked Tachibana. Yes sir. My name's Tachibana Rei and I come from the capital. Maruboshi didn't interrupt or introduce Tachibana but was a little surprised when he noticed Tachibana didn't introduce himself as the current prince of the Land of Fire. I see. If you're new around here then worry not. Just for today, I shall give you all the bowls of ramen you can eat for free. Is that so? Tachibana asked and Tyuki nodded with a smile. Thank you for that then, I'm running a little low on funds so it's a savor. Their meal at Ichiraku Ramen was fantastic, with Tachibana enjoying his food to the fullest while laughing at the occasional jokes Maruboshi or Tyuki cracked. They resumed their journey through Konoha and Tachibana felt fascinated by everything. The Hokage rock, visible from any part of the village, was even more awe-inspiring from up close. The Nara forest full of wildlife and deer was fascinating to trek through. The library was vast and awesome, even though he couldn't currently borrow any jutsus from it. The occasional banter between people turning into a silly game of tossing hand signs to pretend to cast a devastating jutsu also seemed fun. What amazed Tachibana the most were the several shinobi running around the village performing one task after another, running across walls and rooftops to deliver letters, food or sometimes even a lost pet. The free life was something remarkably different from the one Tachibana had lived until recently at the capital, where he was always followed by guards, hidden and in the open. Eventually, it was time for Maruboshi to leave after they bought ingredients to make food at the end of their trip, but Tachibana held Maruboshi back by asking him a question. "Maruboshi-san, is it possible for me to become a shinobi?" "It is. Everyone can become one if they have a heart that beats with the desire to protect," Maobashi said jovially. But Tachibana, unsatisfied with the generic response, reiterated his question, "Is it possible I become a shinobi that belongs to the village of Konoha?" Instantly, Maruboshi became stunned, since this wasn't a request he'd estimated to get from the young prince, so he did the first thing he could think of to distance Tachibana from this idea. "But Tachibana-san, it requires quite a lot of hard work to become a full-fledged ninja." Tachibana appeared to think for a few moments and then closed his eyes as he let his pendulum fall before him. Soon, after mumbling for a bit, he opened his eyes, only to find the pendulum spinning clockwise. "See that, Maruboshi-san? Fate tells me I should become a shinobi. And I'm trusting enough of fate not to make the mistake of avoiding it." To the out-of-the-world argument Tachibana presented to him as a spinning pendulum, the man with the walk on his back could formulate no response. "This. Is he asking me to believe a spinning chain told him to become a shinobi? Single quote. What do I do?" Eventually, after giving up any thoughts of counter-arguments, Maruboshi replied with, "I will need to speak with the Hokage-sama about this. I'm sorry, but it is beyond my ability to respond to your question." Tachibana, with a smile on his face, nodded as he spoke. "All right then, I shall wait for your and the Hokage-sama's response. Thank you for entertaining me for today." Maruboshi nodded and left the remote Senju house turned into a hotel and quickly walked towards the Hokage tower. "Hokage-sama," Maruboshi said as he kneeled in front of Hiruzen. "Speak, Kausuke. I hope there was no trouble today." "No, Hokage-sama, I fulfilled my task perfectly." "I see. Good job. As expected of you. If only you'd allow me to promote you to a Junin." "Hokage-sama, Tachibana-san asked me a question at the end of the trip to which I had no response." Maruboshi cut off Hiruzen since he didn't want to get into another argument with him about his duties, and the Prince of the Land of Fire had asked him a question too. Maruboshi's words caught Hiruzen's interest and he nodded. "What did he ask you about?" "He asked if he could become a shinobi of Konoha." Huh. Hiruzen's eyes widened. "What?" Maruboshi remained silent, confirming what Hiruzen had just heard was not wrong. Hiruzen immediately picked up his smoking stick and inhaled a puff of smoke. A royal wanting to become a shinobi. The silence between them broke when Hiruzen opened his mouth again. "Did he give you a reason why he wants to become one?" "Yes, Hokage-sama, he mumbled something, and when his pendulum was spinning clockwise, told me that it was what fate wanted of him." Hiruzen's eyes narrowed at this piece of information as he thought about it a little more, but then he asked Maruboshi something else. "Did he use chakra? Was it a jutsu he performed?" "No, Hokage-sama, I felt no chakra fluctuations coming from the boy. I'm sure if he had any chakra in his body the sensors would have picked it up by now." Troublesome. "I have another mission for you, Kosuke. But it doesn't involve other shinobi. You will be alone on this mission." Hiruzen pacified the stern old man in front of him. "All you have to do is send a letter to the daimyo and bring his response. You may pick up the letter tomorrow from the receptionist." Maruboshi nodded and after Hiruzen's permission left the Hokage office to prepare for his short mission tomorrow. Hiruzen stood up from his seat and walked over to the window, looking over the entire village. "This could be very good for Konoha if done right. We could use Tachibana's connections to the daimyo to gain more money for the village when he's given a pseudo-important position." He seems like a crackpot, so it should be possible to satisfy him by simply giving him a position where he can remain a salted fish. The next morning Maruboshi picked up the letter from the receptionist and left for the capital. "Greetings," Maruboshi said to the guards who stood at the entrance of the royal castle. The guards looked at him but did not speak. Used to such attitude from the guards after the various missions he had taken as a genin, Maruboshi immediately explained his purpose. "Hokage-sama has tasked me with bringing an important letter to the daimyo. I also have to wait for his response." The guards looked at each other and pulled away their spears to allow Maruboshi to enter the castle. Inside the castle, Maruboshi was guided by a well-dressed servant who took him to a reception hall where he was asked to wait for his turn to meet the daimyo. Not long after Maruboshi was kneeling in front of the daimyo. Skipping past the general greetings, the daimyo immediately came to the main issue of the letter. And as soon as he saw the name Tachibana Rei, his eyes became hyper-focused. Did Rei-chan do something to anger the Hoka? He wants to become a shinobi. But true to his experience as the leader of a nation, the daimyo immediately calmed down. Rei-kun wouldn't have walked into a dangerous situation given his divination abilities, so I can rule out this letter being written after Rei-kun was forced. So it is Rei's wish to become a shinobi. Sigh, and here I thought by working hard I'd be able to pass off my seek to Rei-kun and the cheeky little fella wouldn't have to work another day in his life and he'd just enjoy everything given to him. Everything about Rei changed the day he peed his bed. Sigh, there has been no convincing him recently. I guess I listen to him again or he'll try to do it sneakily. Like when he performed divinations for all the servants in the castle. Or when he tried to disguise himself as an old man and perform divinations for the populace. Shijimi will be angry with me once again. Only after 3 days and nights of arguing with his wife, was the daimyo able to send back a letter with Maruboshi to the Hokage. "Hokage-sama, I have brought back a response." Maruboshi gladly held the scroll the daimyo had given him while he was in the royal capital of the Fire Nation. Hiruzen picked up the extravagant scroll and unfolded it to read what was inside it. A smile formed on his face and he folded the letter and handed it back to Maruboshi. "Give this to Tachibana-san and ask him if he's still willing to become a shinobi." "Yes, Hokage-sama." Maruboshi nodded and was about to leave when Hiruzen added, "If he agrees, you'll teach him to become a shinobi, Kosuke." Maruboshi froze in his steps but Hiruzen anticipated his rejection and placed a counter-argument, "It has to be you, Maruboshi. No one else in the current Junin roster is unaffiliated with a minor or major clan in the village. It can only be you." Maruboshi frowned but couldn't find a reason to fight back the order of the Hokage as he'd always done earlier. He understood the significance of the matter and thus nodded calmly before leaving to give Tachibana an answer to his question. How good should Tachibana's talent be? How much chakra should Tachibana have? Low is good chakra control, high is poor chakra control. Should he use any weapons or just go pure hand-to-hand combat? My default response currently is he should be as talented as an average shinobi, but he is very tricky to fight against because of his clever usage of what he knows. I want him to have low chakra for now, but as he develops his body further I want his chakra to increase. I want him to use a sword, but hand-to-hand combat is also acceptable. Thank you for reading. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Enjoying swinging on the rocking chair in the library as he read a book about the feats of Hashirama, Tachibana let out a big yawn. It had been 4 days since he'd last seen anyone or stepped out of the house. Maruboshi hadn't come to pick him up or tell him anything about the request he'd put forth, so he hadn't left the house with the worry that he'd miss Maburoshi if he left the house. He was just about to doze off while reading about the great battle at the Valley of the End when he heard a soft knock on his door. Tachibana almost stumbled out of his rocking chair as he activated his spirit vision to check who was outside. Maruboshi-san. Finally. Tachibana opened the door after ensuring he was presentable and greeted his only source of communication with the village. Good afternoon Maruboshi-san. What brings you to this humble abode? Good afternoon to you too, Tachibana-san. I come bearing news from the capital for you. Maruboshi said, presenting the ornate scroll that Tachibana instantly recognized was from the royal court. Tachibana opened the scroll and began to read what was inside with some worry. Does Dad want to stop me from? Tachibana's eyes widened as he read a few sentences in the letter. As such, I disown Tachibana Rei from my family. I specifically want the shinobi who hasn't graduated from the academy and goes by the name Tachibana Rei to involve himself fully in the affairs of shinobi and write me a report about it once each week. So Dad kicked me out so that the politics of a royal family member learning how to use chakra doesn't become complicated and cause the families of other court members to come up with the same idea. And by assigning me a special mission, which will probably grow stronger as I do, he made sure to set a precedent so that none of the other noble families kick their children out to learn how to use chakra without giving them a mission that similarly escalates in difficulty as I grow stronger. The rest of the letter discussed the pay he'd be earning for his mission. It was the standard rate for a simple D-rank mission, about 10,000 ryo. Tachibana employed his abilities as a clown to manage his expressions well and appear appropriately shocked and excited as he looked at Maruboshi, who was quietly evaluating him. Does this mean I get to have a sensei, Maruboshi-san? Yes, Maruboshi said, scratching the back of his head with some embarrassment. I have been appointed as your sensei and hope to help you catch up with the other students who have attended the academy since the age of 6. Tachibana showed an excited smile outwardly, but on the inside, he was a little tired of what was happening. I guess I'll have to work hard from now on. After that, Maruboshi only told him to get prepared to wake up early and come to training ground 7 tomorrow, and after a short conversation left to make his preparations. Neither did Tachibana have any shinobi tools to carry, nor did he have an appropriate uniform. When he brought up this issue with Maruboshi, he said it was all right to show up in loose clothes that wouldn't hinder his mobility and that he'd handle the rest. I can't believe it. I'm going to become a shinobi soon. Tachibana spent the rest of the day picking out an outfit for himself before cooking dinner and falling asleep with excitement for the next day. Walking up to the training ground 7 the next day after getting delayed due to getting lost, Tachibana couldn't contain his excitement when he saw Maruboshi waiting for him while sitting on a log, chipping away at wood to create figurines. Tachibana entered the grounds and after arriving in front of Maruboshi bowed slightly as a sign of respect. Good morning Maruboshi-sensei. What are we going to do today? The 3 Academy Jutsu. Perhaps a simple D-rank mission. Or maybe even something clever like tailing a spy. Maruboshi looked at Tachibana and smiled. No Tachibana-san, we will be doing this. Out of nowhere, when Maruboshi placed a seal on the ground in front of him, several books popped up. A sealing tag. And what's with all the books? Even though he was frowning a little, Tachibana picked up the closest book to him. It was a leather-bound textbook with the title, 101 Tips and Tricks for the New Shinobi. We're reading. Tachibana complained, but Maruboshi only smiled. Can't we at least unlock my chakra or something so that I can learn the jutsus by myself? We'll start training the academy jutsus only after you've learned all the knowledge and wisdom in those books. But I have a proposition, Tachibana-san, Maruboshi said with a coy smile. Tachibana nodded, indicating he'd hear him out. If you are able to master all 3 academy jutsus within a span of 6 months and are qualified enough to complete 12 D-rank missions with 3 C-rank missions, I shall recommend you to join the Chunin exams. Internally, Tachibana was a little shocked, but he asked a question to keep his ignorant cover. Chunin exams. Yes. There are 3 qualifications of a shinobi: Genin, Chunin and Jonin. As soon as a student graduates from the ninja academy, they are labeled Genin. When they are ready, they take part in a competition with the shinobi of other villages to display their skills, and once they pass the judges, they're labeled Chunin. Then how does one become a Jonin? Another test. Yes. The Hokage tests you with missions and the like to promote you personally from a Chunin to a Jonin. I see. So this Chunin exam will allow me to be promoted to a Chunin if I perform well enough. Precisely. And that shall be the aim of your practice for the next 6 months. I understand. But then wouldn't unlocking my chakra right now be better? So that I can get used to it. No. Let's do it like this. If you finish reading all these books in the next 2 weeks, I will teach you how to need chakra. If you fail, I'll reject you as my student. Tachibana frowned and looked down at all the stacks of books. There are a lot of books here, but at least my memory as a seer will help me learn and memorize all of these books quickly. But isn't it impossible to reject me? Since the daimyo has hired me to learn about the shinobi system. True. Normally that would be the case, but you are currently weaker than any academy student. So what new information can you give to the daimyo after a few weeks? Surely you don't want to anger the daimyo by giving him the same information every day. Tachibana frowned. Although Dad probably wouldn't get angry if I did that, Mom will probably want me to return home. Now let's get you started with your first test. Maruboshi spoke with a happy smile that sent shivers down Tachibana's spine. First test. Isn't that to finish reading the book in 2 weeks? No. That's just a little something to motivate you. Your test is to finish 20 laps around the ground in 20 minutes. Tachibana smiled and asked Maruboshi, "Are you sure you want to give me such an easy task?" Maruboshi just smiled dangerously while pulling out his stopwatch and showing it to Tachibana. "Your time has already begun." With his physique enhanced by the clown potion, it only took Tachibana 15 minutes to run laps around the training ground. "Color me impressed," Maruboshi said with a friendly smile, but it soon morphed to become sly. "Now that the warm-up is done, I want you to complete 100 push-ups while you read this book." Although exasperated, Tachibana caught the book that Maruboshi threw at him. From Good to Great, How to Become a Shinobi. Tachibana opened the book and placed it under his face as he lay down in the plank position to perform push-ups while reading. Turning the first page, he heard Maruboshi's question, "What are the different ways to unlock chakra?" Tachibana mulled over his words before speaking calmly while keeping his push-ups. "There are 3 ways to unlock your chakra. One is by meditating to increase your senses to feel your physical energy. Another way is using the help of a different person who can push their chakra into your system. And the last method is just to be born with the ability." Maruboshi nodded and then asked another question, "What does the color of one's chakra indicate?" Different colors indicate the affinity of one's chakra to different elements. What is the method by which one can unlock their chakra with the help of others? An experienced sensei can help unlock the ability to sense physical energy by pouring their chakra into the student's body. The student needs to be fully tired when this is done because suddenly needing a lot of chakra could cause strain on the chakra pathways and damage them. Good. Keep reading and I'll keep asking you questions like these. Tachibana nodded and soon managed to complete the challenge of 100 push-ups. But Maruboshi was relentless. He made Tachibana move on to sit-ups, pull-ups and also forced him to maintain the horse stance with weights on his arms all while he was asking him questions about everything he was reading. It was a little difficult and by the end of the day, Tachibana felt his entire body aching. But he knew this was important for the next thing on the agenda, so he bore through it. "It took a little longer than I expected, but your energy for today is drained." "Good. This means from tomorrow we'll be able to train for longer." Tachibana nodded and then sat down cross-legged in front of Maruboshi. "Now that you're tired, it'll be easy to help you." Maruboshi placed his hand on Tachibana's back and after a few seconds, when Tachibana's breathing had stabilized, poured chakra into his chakra circulatory system. Unlike the warm sensation when Tachibana had consumed the potion to become a Byander, he felt a cool sensation fill his body. At first, the sensation was only in the middle of his back, but it soon spread across his body like a stream of water flowing down a glacier. The sensation crept through his entire body, interacting with all his cells. It made him feel tingly, as if being brushed by a feather. Tachibana's posture relaxed as he immersed fully in this sensation. The initial high slowly died out and soon Tachibana felt his entire body in detail. It was as if a map of his body was imprinted in his mind. "How are you feeling?" Maruboshi asked without removing his hand from Tachibana's back. Like I can see everything happening inside my body. The statement was true since Tachibana could feel the several tenketsu along the chakra pathways coursing around his cells. It was an intricate web of connecting pathways and fibrous tubules that filled his entire body. I see. That likely indicates you have a good talent for sensing. Let's move on for now. Try stimulating the cells around your navel region. Tachibana did as he was told and imagined a sensation of tickling the cells around his navel. And much to his surprise, Tachibana suddenly felt a new energy leave his cells. It felt like he was extracting something from his cells. It made them feel heavier and he didn't feel as good as before. Is this supposed to happen? Like I feel someone stopped tickling my stomach. This is physical energy, right? Haha, yes. Although that's an interesting way to put it, it is supposed to happen and is physical energy or yang energy. Now, I want you to tickle your brain in the same way and extract a similar amount of yin or spiritual energy from it. Tachibana did the same, and to his surprise, he felt his brain produce spirituality instead of physical energy. Now what? Pull the spiritual energy towards your navel where the physical energy is. Just like you read in the book. Tachibana did as told and brought the two energies closer to each other. And just as they came together, they merged suddenly into a more tactile feeling. It felt like someone had filled the area surrounding Tachibana's navel with water. Good. You've formed chakra. Maruboshi complimented as he removed his hand and caused the chakra he'd pushed into Tachibana's body to dissipate. Circulate it around the pathways you'd just seen so that you get used to moving it and how it feels. Tachibana nodded and began to circulate the chakra all around his chakra pathways. And after a few minutes, when he felt he got used to it, he opened his eyes. Why do we produce chakra in the tenketsu around the navel, sensei? Tachibana asked as he turned around to look at Maruboshi. Good question. Maruboshi nodded, but can you think of a reason why? Because it's the largest one. Precisely because of that, spiritual and physical energies mix only inside tenketsu points in the chakra pathways. So doing it in the biggest one makes it much easier for everyone. Is there a use to using the other tenketsu for it? There is, but it is a high-level concept that you don't need to bother yourself with now. Tachibana nodded, and then his eyes suddenly turned expectant and gained a small glimmer as he looked at Maruboshi with a smile. Sai, why did I think you'd be any different from kids your age? Maruboshi said happily as he pulled out a small scroll from his pocket. He tossed the scroll to Tachibana and spoke, that's the most basic of the 3 academy jutsus, the transformation jutsu. Tachibana nodded with a smile and stood up from his position. I'll master it by tomorrow. No way. You will not. Be realistic. It isn't as easy as you think to learn even the simplest of jutsus. Why do you think students spend 6 years in the academy if it was so easy to master the 3 academy jutsus? I dunno. Maybe they're lazy. Tachibana thought, considering how Itachi and Kakashi had graduated much earlier than the rest in the anime. In just 6 months, if I'm not wrong. Which kid have you ever seen that isn't excited to learn how to use superpowers? Maruboshi asked with sneaky smile. Tachibana's sugar rush ended, but before he could crash, Maruboshi spoke to encourage him a little. What I want you to do is learn everything about the jutsu by tomorrow. The theories about how it works, what disadvantages and advantages it has, and what are its limits. Tachibana nodded and then bowed politely. Take care, sensei. I'll see you tomorrow. Inside the library, Tachibana sat upside down on his chair while reading the transformation jutsu scroll. So the transformation jutsu uses chakra to morph appearances. And it uses the tenketsu in the body to manipulate the shape and color the chakra takes after it is used. Tachibana stood up with the scroll open on his chair and looked at the exact hand seals he had to make and how he had to morph the chakra in his body to activate the jutsu. I don't have enough chakra currently, but since I've rested all this while, I think I can squeeze out a little bit from my body without burdening it. He closed his eyes to focus and direct a bit of his spirituality towards the tenketsu around his navel and mixed it with a bit of physical energy to generate a little chakra. Tachibana felt the familiar cooling sensation as he circulated the chakra around his circulatory system. And after a few minutes of moving his chakra around his body, he was ready to try out the new jutsu. Tachibana read the scroll and stood at ease before performing the first seal, dog. Holding the hand seal, Tachibana slowly moved his chakra around his body exactly as the scroll described, at least he tried since immediately after he was. That's surprising. He felt a little strain in his chakra if he chose the wrong path to move his chakra in while holding the dog symbol. So Tachibana immediately became distracted and started performing all the 12 basic hand signs that he remembered being used in the show. As expected, the hand signs help in choosing the path that the chakra should travel in by tightening the other paths in the body. With just 12 hand signs there are probably millions or even billions of combinations out there. Which only increases if one can count all the ways these can be combined to form jutsus. Tachibana shuddered at Orochimaru's thirst and desire for knowledge of all ninjutsu in the world that have been made and will ever be made in the future. Wouldn't he never be able to get them all? Tachibana shook his head and went back to studying his current jutsu, but in even less time he got distracted by fanciful thoughts about chakra control. So better chakra control is related to reducing hand seals. Is that how Hashirama and Madara activated their jutsus with a single hand seal or sometimes even none? But then how do you train your chakra control to that extent? The leaf concentration, tree walking and water walking exercises. But I doubt they'd make you as good as Hashirama or Madara. After all, there are several shinobi who train using these methods. Perhaps the medic nin. I remember Tsunade having the best chakra control out of the Sannin. Forget it, I'll ask Maboroshi tomorrow. Refocusing on the scroll open in front of him, Tachibana began performing the jutsus once again from the beginning. He formed the dog seal and moved his chakra through a few tenketsu. He did the same with the boar hand seal, and then with the ram hand seal. There was a sudden puff of smoke beside Tachibana as he felt all the chakra he was controlling suddenly be sucked out of him and travel into the puff of smoke. The smoke cleared and under Tachibana's shocked gaze was a disabled half-dead disfigured clone. But I did it. I made a clone. Why does this excite me even more than throwing paper cards as sharp as a shuriken? Tachibana spent a little more time with the jutsu and extracted every last bit of chakra his body could provide him with. Although none of his attempts were better than the first attempt, Tachibana was satisfied with merely a puff of smoke and the disfigured clone. After all, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was Konoha probably. And that was about 17 attempts. Is that great? I mean, Naruto could make thousands of solid clones. Back in his chair, Tachibana's eyes landed on the shelf filled to the brim with books beside him. Why don't I pick out a book for the night? Tachibana stood up from the chair and dragged himself to the shelf to pick out a book but stopped and returned to his chair. He closed his eyes and performed a quick dream divination. The book which will help me the most. Muttering the statement 7 times, Tachibana used cogitation to enter a state of deep sleep before his astral body escaped into the spirit world. A swirl of colors that almost blended together passed by Tachibana's eyes, but they soon separated and formed a scene he recognized. It's the room I'm currently in. Is there a good book here? Tachibana looked on and soon a red-haired woman dressed in an elaborate red yukata walked into view. Who's she? Red hair, so an Uzumaki. She walked to the bookshelf but slowly altered her direction to reach the wooden pillar supporting the shelf. She soon placed her hand on the pillar and waited for a few seconds. A ceiling array expanded on the pillar momentarily before vanishing like it was never there. But simultaneously, the shelf sunk into the wall. The dream ended there and Tachibana awoke from his short dream with a slight shock. A secret room. Tachibana moved to the shelf, placed his hand on the same spot Mito had and tried pushing on it. Nothing happened. Did they perhaps remove the room or someth? Oh, it might be chakra. Tachibana created a little bit of chakra from the strength he had left and poured it into the wooden pillar. Nothing happened for a second, but for a moment, complex black ceiling diagrams flooded the pillar before vanishing like they never existed. The bookshelf sank into the wall just like it had in the dream, and Tachibana moved to push it further. The shelf sank into the wall further and opened like a door, leading Tachibana to the secret room he'd been so excited about. Tachibana stepped into the room and saw the large shelves that extended from wall to wall, but the light in the library showed him how all of it was now covered under a layer of dust as if time had left this area undisturbed for a decade. Moving closer to the nearest shelf, Tachibana read the title of the first book he could find, A Beginner's Guide to Sealing. Tachibana pulled out the book and cracked its spine carefully. There were several lines of text, diagrams and hieroglyphs, but the interesting part was that it was all handwritten. This is Mito's legacy. Whose house was this originally that Mito had a secret library of her books constructed here? Did she live in this house too? But it's so small. Tachibana was overjoyed. But he kept his excitement in control so that no one outside would become suspicious of his actions. He slipped the book into his dress and walked back out of the secret room after closing it such that there were no traces of the room left to be noticed. I guess I'm also learning sealing now. I plan to make Tachibana capable of making a seal that can act as a calculator for his jutsus. For example, he could use a fireball jutsu but the seal would take over control and cause it to follow its target, or he could use a jutsu that required intense calculations without straining his mind in the Shippuden arc. Is that alright? I'm not sure yet if he'll share this with anyone else. I'm leaning towards he should not. Thank you for reading. A little girl with brown eyes and twin-tailed black hair skipped down the street lost in her daydreams. In her hands was a strawberry dip that she was licking and munching on occasionally. Just as she turned a corner, "Boo!" A sudden face appeared in front of her. The face was weird and scary. It was pale like a sheet of paper and had blood all over it. Ah! The girl screamed while crouching and dropping her chocoberry candy while immediately closing her eyes in fear. Is this the demon who eats children? Is it Miruko's turn? But Miruko did nothing wrong. Miruko only wanted to eat her chocoberry. Miruko is scared. The little girl's train of thought broke and she flinched when she felt a hand touch her head, but soon after when she realized that the hand was only patting her head she gathered the courage to open her eyes. Is the monster checking how Miruko tastes? She bravely looked up at the monster patting her head and found that the monster's face was painted white with an exaggerated smile painted on with red lipstick. Its nose was painted red too. Now that the little girl had looked at the monster properly, she found it a bit funny, but then she remembered something and bit the monster's hand which was petting her head. Wad, monsta, emwade Muruko el wus chubelly. The silent clown didn't appear to be hurt by her retaliation and even looked like it was laughing, so Miruko increased the force of her bite. But the clown didn't falter and instead pulled out his other hand from behind his back. Miruko's eyes widened when she saw the chocoberry in the clown's hand and immediately left his hand for the chocoberry, which was tastier than the weird man's hand. Tachibana's had a smile on his face as he saw the girl taking back her chocoberry and inspecting it from all angles to check if it was damaged in any way. He'd been out in the village after his training for the day with Maruboshi ended to digest the clown potion by acting as a clown and making children around an orphanage laugh. He'd seen Miruko go out with a bit of money to buy some chocolate earlier and decided he'd give her his earnings of the day when she returned after scaring her a little to make her laugh for his final act. But unexpectedly the girl was too frightened to even open her eyes. It made Tachibana question if she was being beaten or bullied by someone, but with no reason to suspect anyone in the orphanage since the kids were all looking fine, he chalked it to the back of his mind. Perhaps the little girl was just extra imaginative. Why did you scare me, big brother? The girl asked with a pout. Because you are very cute, Tachibana said, squishing and manhandling the cheeks of the little girl. Miruko stuck her tongue out and flubbed it around in response, sending spit his way. As compensation for scaring you, I shall give you something good. Good. You'll give Miruko another chocoberry. The girl's eyes shined with stars. Sure. Let's go get another stash of chocoberries just for you. Tachibana said with a smile and extended his hand for the little girl to hold. Turns out big brother isn't bad, Miruko said while grabbing Tachibana's hand and walking with him. What will you do with so many chocoberry, Miruko-chan? Maruko-chan will give it to all her friends in the orphanage. How many friends does Maruko-chan have? So many. So many. Tachibana just shook his head at the little girl's distracted responses since she was focused on finishing her chocoberry and walked to the store that sold Maruko her chocoberry. Maruko-chan, you're back. What happened? Did you drop your chocoberry stick? This mister almost made me drop it, but I quickly finished it. It was just as good as the other times, Oba-san. The old lady behind the stall smiled and turned her head to Tachibana, who was looking silly with the makeup he had on. But irrespective of the impression he gave off, Tachibana spoke to the lady. Good afternoon, boss-san. How many chocoberries can I get for this much? Tachibana asked while giving the shopkeeper all the money he had. That's 500 ryo, about 50. That should do it. Could you please give me those many chocoberry sticks? Is it for the kids in the orphanage? The lady questioned while counting and packaging the sticks on her open stall. Yes. I earned this money from the kids, but since I'm not in desperate need, thought to give it back to them. How kind of you. Are you a shinobi? Not yet. But I'm training to become one. I aim to pass the test that is coming up in a month. Is that so? In which class are you? Maybe my son knows you. I'm sorry, boss-san, but a private tutor teaches me. So I don't know anyone in the academy. Ah, that's alright. I wish you luck in the upcoming test, Shinobi-san. Thank you. With their conversation done, Tachibana walked back to the orphanage to drop off Maruko, but it seemed like Maruko was interested in Tachibana's job as a shinobi. Are you strong, Shinobi-san? Of course. My teacher studied directly under the second Hokage. Tachibana proudly boasted. Then can you teach Maruko how to become a shinobi? Oh, why do you want to learn to become a shinobi, Maruko-chan? Because sometimes bad people come to the orphanage and take away Maruko's friends. Tachibana almost froze when he heard this, but he controlled his expressions to maintain a smile as he continued speaking. Is that so? Then when this big brother becomes a chunin, he'll personally come and teach Maruko-chan how to become a shinobi. Is that alright? Maruko nodded happily and picked the box of chocoberries that Tachibana handed over to her to go and distribute in the orphanage. Goodbye, Maruko-chan. I hope to see you again later. Bye-bye, Oni-chan. As the little girl left Tachibana and entered the orphanage, the smile on his face vanished, replaced by a neutral expression that contained a soft frown. People kidnapping people from the orphanages. Danzo. Tachibana left the area without letting the idea inside his head show for now and returned home. Using his spirit vision to time his escape from the house as the guards were switched out, Tachibana slipped away under the cover of the dark night and moved towards the orphanage. His spirit vision helped him easily dodge the shinobi patrolling the streets, soon reaching the orphanage undetected. Tachibana climbed up the fence and entered the orphanage building sneakily. He then looked for and found an empty room which he used to perform a simple divination. Tachibana murmured his divination statement 7 times and then used cogitation to enter deep sleep. Where did Danzo's men take the orphans from this orphanage? With his eyes immersed in darkness, Tachibana allowed his astral body to float away into the spirit world as a scene played out in front of him. Adults in shinobi gear wearing animal masks appeared in broad daylight in the orphanage. The Materone, although bearing an unwilling expression, gathered all the children into a single room. The children were then separated and taken away by other masked adults, disregarding their screams before everything returned back to normal. Tachibana's vision then shifted to the masked men transporting the unconscious children as they moved to the outskirts of the village. They soon left the village and, slithering through patrols, arrived at an underground base guarded strictly by several shinobi. Is this the root base? The vision shattered in that moment and Tachibana quickly returned to his home and waited for a few hours in the bushes until his guards were changed again and used the opportune moment to re-enter his house. Once inside, Tachibana frowned. Although Danzo will eventually most likely become a problem for me, I'm not strong enough to take him on right now. But that doesn't mean I can't plan ahead. Changing clothes and picking up the book about the basics of seals, Tachibana opened a particular page and began sincerely reading. The page was titled, Explosive Seals. Splash! Tachibana collapsed into the paddy field for the 30th time that day. It had been a week since Tachibana had started taking missions with Maruboshi. He still hadn't been able to perform the transformation jutsu without the result looking like a noodle. So, Maruboshi decided that the best way for Tachibana to train his chakra control was by doing missions. Tachibana was de-weeding a field while trying to pass chakra to the soles of his feet and stay atop the water in the field. But clearly, he wasn't an expert at this since he'd fallen into the water about once every 5 minutes. Is there no trick to this? Tachibana asked Maruboshi, who was sitting on a tree in the field carving figurines of the second Hokage to sell in the village later. I told you. The sooner you learn how to stand on water, the more chances you have of learning a special jutsu from me. Tachibana gave up hope of gaining help from Maruboshi and looked at his wet pants with some discomfort, since along with water that had wet them, there were tiny sand particles that made it coarse on his skin. Let's see what's wrong. Tachibana closed his eyes and thought back to the words Maruboshi had imparted to him about a week ago. Show me what you learnt, Maruboshi said, sitting on his tree stump in Training Ground 7. All right. Tachibana made the dog, boar, and ram hand seals in succession, causing a soft pop to occur, before a disfigured half-dead cartoonish clone formed beside him. Maruboshi's eyes widened as he looked at Tachibana. He looked at Tachibana for a few seconds before looking at the clone and repeated the process for a few minutes in silence. Oh come on. It's not so bad, Tachibana complained as he felt fed up with Maruboshi's judging stare. But Maruboshi just smiled and slowly erupted into full-blown laughter. Why are you laughing? I tried my best. No, you're getting me wrong. Oh, then am I some sort of hidden genius or something? Maruboshi looked at Tachibana, still laughing, but after a few seconds where he wiped away his tears, he asked Tachibana a question. What was the scroll I gave you about, Tachibana-san? Huh, what's that got to do with anything? Tachibana complained, but under Maruboshi's persistent gaze he relented and said, the transfer. As Tachibana said it, he froze. Oh shit indeed. But, Tachibana was confused. Worry not. Your mistake of performing the clone jutsu when you had to do the transformation jutsu reveals an important key point that many students forget about as they begin learning complicated jutsus. Which is that the 3 basic academy jutsus are actually the same jutsu. It's all just the transformation jutsu. How? Transformation jutsu works by using your chakra to change the appearance of your body. Expelling excessive chakra after the transformation creates a clone, and if you apply the same transformation to an object and move away, it becomes the substitution jutsu. But how? I thought they had different seals. The 3 jutsu do indeed have different seals. But if you knew the seals, you'd realize that the way chakra travels with the help of those seals is in a remarkably similar fashion. The seals are different only to help students get used to it easier. Which is why your transformation jutsu ended up with a half-baked clone, since you're using a few wrong pathways and by extension tenketsu. Maruboshi paused to gauge if Tachibana understood and then continued. But that is not where the problem lies. It is a common problem for students to become tense while practicing the transformation jutsu and expel excess or all chakra in their body, making it seem like they're using the clone jutsu when really they're just creating broken transformation. Did you catch all that? I think I understand. Tachibana nodded. Good, then try out the jutsu again, but this time instead of picking the wrong pathways, try to match exactly as the scroll says. Tachibana opened the scroll Maruboshi had given him and studied the pathways again, comparing them to those in his body. I see. That's where I went wrong. Tachibana controlled his chakra to flow down the proper pathway, this time without expelling all of his chakra and only expelling the chakra he used to fill up his pathways. With a soft pop asterisk, a cloud of smoke erupted around Tachibana before it faded to reveal nothing but a disfigured Tachibana. Well, although the transformation is all wonky and messed up, it's a transformation instead of a clone now, so you're good on that front. Maruboshi encouraged. But why is my transformation so wonky and confusing? Because you're using the wrong pathways. Use the right ones and you'll transform accordingly. Tenketsu impart characteristics to your chakra as they pass through them. So all you have to do is touch the right tenketsu so that the transformation is successful. But how do I get the right tenketsu? Is there a trick to it? Maruboshi shook his head. No, just count the pathways in your body properly and do it again. Arg, this seems annoying. How do the students at the academy do it then if they do it quickly if they can't sense their pathways? Simple. They memorize the feeling they get when their transformation is perfect. Not everyone has a clear perception of their pathways like you do. In this regard, you're extremely lucky since all you have to do is count the right pathway. But this is also your bane, since with the clear view of your dense chakra network you're easy to be confused with all the small capillaries. It is confusing. There are like a billion of them small and big inside. Don't worry, we can take it slow and steady. There is no race to learn the jutsu. I don't expect you to do something that takes students a few years to master in just a few days. But I want to be faster. Tachibana argued. Maruboshi looked at Tachibana and then sighed softly. You want to be faster? Yes. Tachibana nodded with conviction. All right then. If you don't want to use your brain, why don't we use your body? Maruboshi accepted a simple D-rank mission from the Hokage. The mission was to deweed a paddy field. Simple on paper yet time-consuming if done normally, but Maruboshi made it harder by asking Tachibana to walk on the stagnant water instead of wading through it to get all the weeds. His reasoning was simple. If you don't want to count your chakra pathways each time you use them, you'll have to learn to feel them instinctually. And there's no better way to do that than to fail a million times until you eventually learn. You need to stop thinking so much about how the chakra is moving and letting it move by itself after you command it. Much like your hand that moves to scratch an itch. Don't think, just do it. Standing in the flooded paddy field, Tachibana closed his eyes and felt his chakra pass through the soles of his feet. The water's still so there's not much I have to adapt to externally. But since my body moves around while picking up the weeds, my center of mass changes, which means I have to allow the chakra to compensate for my movement instinctually instead of stopping and trying to adjust it all myself. Tachibana tried again with a calm mind. He placed his foot on the water and began to circulate chakra, causing his feet to feel like it was stuck to the water's surface. And once he felt it was firm, he shifted his weight to that foot. Except, splash, asterisk, he fell again. But Tachibana was slightly happy since he noticed a peculiar feeling as he fell. My sense of balance. What if I apply it to my chakra instead of my body? Isn't that instinctual too? Tachibana fell a few more times that day, but under Maruboshi's shocked gaze, began to improve rapidly. It seemed as if something had clicked within him as he slowly learned to stand on water. If I have a cheat, I should learn to abuse it. I'm not going to survive in this dog-eat-dog world without doing so. Tachibana's eyes were trained on Maruboshi. He looked at him with the focus of a hawk. In Maruboshi's hand was a single leaf. With a simple flick of his fingers, the leaf tore through the air and landed on Tachibana's exposed upper body with a sharp snap. And surprisingly, instead of slipping off after touching his body, it stuck. I did it! Tachibana exclaimed, picking the different leaves from his chest where they were all stuck with the help of chakra. Maruboshi smiled. Yes, you finally have. This training technique was a new method Maruboshi had made to teach Tachibana about instinctively controlling his chakra in an easier way. Once he had mastered walking on still water, Tachibana could control his chakra to a small degree, but it still wasn't precise enough to perfectly perform the transformation jutsu. So Maruboshi came up with a new technique. He threw leaves at Tachibana while he tried his best to stick those leaves to his body using chakra. This required exquisite control over chakra and fast reflexes since Tachibana needed to act as soon as the leaf came in contact with his skin, otherwise it would just fall off. Give the transformation jutsu a try. Maruboshi encouraged and Tachibana nodded. Tachibana quickly performed the dog, boar and ram seals, and in the otherwise empty training ground, a puff of smoke shot out from Tachibana. Once the smoke cleared, instead of Tachibana was an old man with gray hair with a walk-in ladle on his back. Tachibana looked at himself and jumped joyfully once he found that the transformation had been executed perfectly. I did it. Maruboshi nodded, although there are still a few mistakes in the details. This try of yours is much better. Good job. Tachibana bowed to Maruboshi and spoke with reverence, it was all thanks to you sensei. Haha, your knack for chakra control is what's most impressive here. I only guided you to the best of my abilities. But still, thank you very much for helping me. Say, let's celebrate this short milestone with ramen, Maruboshi suggested and Tachibana nodded. I would love that. Then before we leave, here. Maruboshi tossed another 2 scrolls towards Tachibana who caught them flawlessly. What are these? The clone and substitution jutsus. Learn them on your own. From tomorrow we'll begin with practicing taijutsu. Your body has been conditioned properly for it now. Tachibana looked at the scrolls in his hand excitedly and stuffed them into his pockets to learn once he was home. I'll learn them as quickly as I can. Make sure to double your food intake from tomorrow. Your body will need it for what I've planned. Maruboshi said and Tachibana nodded. Soon they set off towards Ichiraku Ramen with Tachibana talking about various ways he could improve in the remaining 5 months. As they reached the store, a loud voice resounded from inside, I can have another bowl. Believe it. Following that was another soft shout, one more for me. Tachibana looked at the voice he felt like he'd heard a million times before and felt a little surprised. Naruto and Sasuke. Tachibana stepped into the store with Maruboshi and sat down on a chair, but his eyes stayed on the white-haired masked shinobi and his 3 students. They're a genin team, Maruboshi explained, noticing Tachibana's gaze. A genin team consists of 1 jonin and 3 genin. Tachibana asked for confirmation. You were right. As Maruboshi said that, a brown-haired woman in her 20s came to their table to take their orders. What would you like, Maruboshi-san? I'll have a bowl of miso ramen. Maruboshi ordered and Tachibana joined, same for me too. I understand. We'll have your orders prepared shortly. Please wait. Are there so many jonin that all the genin from the academy can be assigned to a team? No. Most genin are sent to the genin corps. They usually form teams with chunin and other genin to complete D and C rank missions. I see. Tachibana nodded. Kakashi-sensei. Will we start taking missions from tomorrow? Sakura asked Kakashi after finishing her bowl of ramen, causing both Sasuke and Naruto to look at Kakashi. Kakashi only smiled as he gave them all an ego-boosting response, now that I've deemed you all to be a team. We will be taking missions from the Hokage Tower from tomorrow. Naruto's eyes widened and he shouted, Uchiha. I'm going to become the Hokage. And then went back to competing with Sasuke on the number of bowls he could finish. Kakashi only smiled, but Tachibana almost snorted the noodles in his mouth through his nose when he heard that. Ah, how fast time flies. Wasn't it only a week ago when you were as excited as those kids? Maruboshi said in a reminiscing tone. How was I to know I'd be given such boring missions? You said we'd take missions to improve my skills and give me some experience. Who'd have thought you meant doing experience instead of actual combat? Tachibana complained and reasoned for himself. Maruboshi smiled and said, if you can master the basic taijutsu style in the next 2 weeks, I'll ask the Hokage for a real mission. Tachibana's eyes widened and then narrowed. Are you trying to make fun of me again? By getting my hopes up? Maruboshi laughed and shook his head. No, don't worry. I'm being serious. I'll ask the Hokage for a bandit extermination mission if you learn the leaf taijutsu style in 2 weeks. Maruboshi pulled another scroll from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. Tachibana's eyes gained a fire as he heard that, and he swallowed all his noodles quickly and picked up the scroll. I'll learn it in a single week. Tachibana challenged and stood up to leave for his home. He had a lot to do and wasn't willing to waste time in a ramen store. Once home, Tachibana pulled out the taijutsu scroll and looked at it for the first time. 130 different stances. That means I've got to learn about 19 stances every day to learn it all in under a week. Tachibana nodded and got to stretching his muscles so that he wouldn't pull them while learning to cause cramps in the middle of the night. The week passed by quickly, with Tachibana's routine being quite busy. He woke up early in the morning to meet with Maruboshi and condition his body to take hits and dish them out without breaking his bones. This involved punching trees with his bare knuckles until they were numb enough to create dents in the bark. Then he would take a short break for about 2 hours in which he dressed up as a clown and went around the village making people laugh to act and digest his potion. He had lunch after he was done acting and then left to go to Maruboshi once again, where he had 8 short spars with Maruboshi, each spanning about 15 to 20 minutes. After the spars, Tachibana listened to Maruboshi about the mistakes in earlier rounds and the improvements he could make. This was a little difficult, however, since unlike most people, Tachibana had an incredible sense of balance due to his clown potion. So Maruboshi was often forced to predict attacks from unexpected angles. This was an advantage because it meant Tachibana's attacks were often unexpected. But it was also a disadvantage because sometimes he instinctually ruined his posture in favor of attacking when he should actually have backed away. It was an issue of instinct, so Maruboshi did his best to make Tachibana learn not to do so by giving him a thorough beating each time he attempted to stray. Coming home, Tachibana practiced all the stances in the Konoha leaf taijutsu scroll for a while. After which he practiced the 3 academy ninjutsu. The last 2 hours before sleeping he practiced sealing. At this point in his journey to learn sealing though, Tachibana hadn't even made a single seal yet, since the theory of getting started itself was quite complicated and made his head hurt a little. On the final day of the week, Tachibana lay on his bed thinking back to Ichiraku Ramen. Sasuke's quite handsome. Naruto is quite the looker too, but his dress makes him look a little squished. And Sakura, well, throughout the entire time at Ichiraku Ramen she kept looking at Sasuke. Tachibana woke up the next morning and arrived at the training grounds before Maruboshi and warmed up quickly. "Maruboshi-san, I'm ready to prove myself," Tachibana said as soon as he saw Maruboshi enter the training ground. Maruboshi was happy that Tachibana was excited, but he shook his head. "Our spars will remain in the afternoon." Tachibana opened his mouth to interrupt, but Maruboshi continued without allowing him to speak. "I have a long-awaited gift for you. The new jutsu that I promised to bring for you once you mastered water walking." Tachibana's mood instantly brightened. "Oh, which jutsu is it?" Maruboshi only threw him a small scroll. Tachibana immediately unfurled it and looked at the name. Body Flicker Jutsu. The Body Flicker Jutsu is one of the most important jutsus in any shinobi's arsenal. Had to convince the Hokage for quite a while when I requested it for you. It's usually only given to chunins. Maruboshi thought back to his time in the Hokage's office when he reported about Tachibana's regular schedule. Is he learning well, Yosuke? Kneeling in front of the Hokage, Maruboshi spoke. "Yes, Hokage-sama. Although he doesn't have exceptional amounts of chakra, he is still better than most civilians. And his learning speed isn't bad either. Any particular fields he stands out in. His taijutsu is the fastest to develop, Hokage-sama. But even in taijutsu it isn't his skill to fight that has developed the most, but it is his ability to predict his opponent's moves. In time this should extend to make him a taijutsu specialist." "I see. And his ninjutsu skills?" "His ninjutsu skills are average. But given his ability to sense his chakra pathways being much better than even a few other geniuses in the village, he can catch up to the students who've studied much longer than him quite easily. So if he's given a ninjutsu he'll be able to learn it well, but not make or modify his own." "Yes, Hokage-sama, for now that should be true. But in the future, it will be possible for him to begin modifying ninjutsu as he learns more about them." I see. Hokage-sama, if I may, I have a request." "Oh, and what is that?" "I want to take him on a bandit extermination mission after 2 weeks, after teaching him the body flicker jutsu for his safety." Hiruzen frowned when he heard that, but he asked, "Are you sure he's ready for that?" "He is a lot more mature than his peers, my lord. Even though I've taken him on several D-rank missions he doesn't argue much about it. It's as if he already knows the dark side of the world." Hiruzen leaned back in his chair and sucked a puff of smoke from his pipe. "Must have learnt about it while he was under the daimyo. There was a short pause before Hiruzen asked something else. Has he told you about any of the messages he has sent to the daimyo? I have never asked him about it directly, but from what I've learnt while we've spoken is that he has been greatly excited to become a part of the Konoha shinobi force. He's often quoting the will of the fire of the first Hokage as he speaks during our breaks. Hiruzen's eyebrows lifted and a smile formed on his face. I knew it. Putting those books in those shelves at the Senju house was bound to be for the good. It seems those books have done well in educating Tachibana-kun about the village. Hiruzen quickly controlled his expression and nodded. You may take a bandit extermination mission after 2 weeks, after teaching him the body flicker jutsu. Keep up the good work, Yosuke. You've done well in teaching Tachibana-kun and being a mentor to him in other aspects of Konoha. Maruboshi nodded and was about to leave, but Hiruzen's words stopped him. Do you still not want to become a Jonin Kosuke? Maruboshi shook his head and wordlessly left the Hokage office, leaving behind a sighing Hiruzen. Breaking Maruboshi's flashback was Tachibana, who asked him a question. Is this why water walking works, sensei? Maruboshi looked at Tachibana and saw him pointing at the portion of the scroll that indicated how the body flicker jutsu actually worked. Yes. Chakra has 2 properties for every material known to man. For a precise amount of chakra, it can do one of 2 things: stick to the material or expulse it. Water walking uses chakra to cause the surface tension of the water to increase by making it stick to your souls. While the body flicker jutsu uses the ability to expulse the ground by gathering chakra at your feet and forcefully propelling you in the selected direction. I see. Tachibana nodded and carefully studied the scroll before placing it in his pocket and looking at Maruboshi. Go ahead, try it out. I didn't give it to you only to read it. Maruboshi encouraged Tachibana. Tachibana nodded and stood in a running stance before concentrating chakra on his feet and in a burst expelling them outward so he would be shot in the opposite direction. Except once the chakra was expelled from his feet, there wasn't a great explosion or even a crack on the ground. With a soft puff, dust suddenly shot out from under Tachibana's feet and clouded the surroundings. Fit. Tachibana waved away the cloud of dust around himself and looked at Maruboshi, whose shoulders were trembling as he tried holding back his laughter while looking at him, causing him to frown. Why are you laughing? Maruboshi waved his hand as if he didn't want to offend Tachibana by saying the wrong thing, but Tachibana didn't let it go. He walked closer to Maruboshi and looked into his eyes as he asked him again, why are you laughing? Maruboshi bit his tongue to keep himself under control as he spoke. Worry not, Tachibana, it isn't anything detrimental to you. Tachibana only rolled his eyes and softly punched Maruboshi. Come on, tell me. It's not like I'm going to eat you for cracking a joke. Maruboshi looked at Tachibana and then gauged him for a few seconds before whispering, Art. Art? Tachibana asked, confused. Maruboshi shook his head and said in a little louder voice this time, fart. F.A. fart. Tachibana's brows furrowed, but then his eyes met Maruboshi's. And within seconds the two of them were rolling on the floor laughing. Seriously. I paid so much attention to the expulsion of chakra from my feet and you called it a fart. Old man, why don't you grow up? But your face. It was so scrunched up and once you finished you were so relaxed. Maruboshi countered while holding his stomach. Ha ha ha, I can imagine that, I must have been like ooh and then ah. Hee hee hee. There was another round of laughter before Maruboshi and Tachibana calmed down and were ready to continue learning the body flicker jutsu. So what did I do wrong? I collected exactly the amount of chakra the scroll said and expelled it at the exact time it mentioned and the angle too. What was wrong? Tachibana asked calmly. Maruboshi shook his head and explained softly, that's the problem. The scroll is written with my height, weight and chakra pathway structure in mind. What you need to do is modify it to suit your body. I could do it for you, but you want me to learn how to modify jutsus on my own. Tachibana completed. You took the words out of my mouth. Maruboshi said as he went back to sitting on his tree stump and observing Tachibana as he tried to modify the jutsu to suit his needs. Tachibana crashed into the floor face first, eating dust multiple times. He even crashed into the trees at the border of the training ground a few times, but he never gave up. After every crash, Tachibana walked it off and continued to train without caring how many bruises he got. Maruboshi, observing this, only had one thought: is he so driven only because of love for ninjutsu? Or is something else driving him? Perhaps a political assassination attempt. But I never heard of any news where the daimyo and his family were attacked. Each time he talks about Hashirama's jutsus, his love for ninjutsu is apparent, almost like a child's love for their toy. But is that all? Is it to do with his strange claims about being a seer? Has he seen something in the future that requires him to polish his skills quickly to save himself? But if it was a single event, a noble would simply hire guards and protect themselves against the one person, or even assassinate him. Plenty of people have been killed for less. So what's his motive? Maruboshi was once again broken out of his thoughts when Tachibana collapsed to the ground without much chakra left in his body. I'm tired. I'll take a short break and then continue training, sensei. Maruboshi nodded, but his contemplative gaze remained as he looked at the bruised and battered young boy who was taking deep breaths on the training ground floor. No way, if he'd seen the future he would have just used the daimyo's help to avoid whatever was coming. He wouldn't have had to leave his family and arrive in Konoha. It's probably some strange noble thing to pretend to be able to see the future. Maybe he just wants attention like our village prankster. Ready to get beaten? Tachibana arrogantly asked Maruboshi as he readied his stance against the eternal genin. Yeah sure, Maruboshi said, adopting a casual stance to indicate he was ready. Tachibana circled Maruboshi, trying to gauge when to attack. He kept his steps light as he did to keep his intent hidden about when he'd actually attack, so he could keep the element of surprise. Without looking at Tachibana, Maruboshi spoke calmly. What happened to you? Scared? I thought you loved to clash fists like a real man. As if I'd be scared of an old man who's been a genin his entire life. Tachibana countered, but then he added on, and how scared are you that you can't even look me in the eye? That seemed to have riled up Maruboshi, since he turned around to look at Tachibana, except instead of eyes he was met with a cloud of dust that was tossed in his direction. With Maruboshi blinded, Tachibana shot out towards him as his fist extended in a full body swing that pierced the air to hit Maruboshi's chin to knock him out instantly. Puff! Tachibana's full body swing stopped instantly when Maruboshi, in spite of being partially blinded, brought his hands together with his fingers interlocked to block Tachibana's punch. Tachibana almost instantly jerked his hand backwards and tried to create distance between the two so that he could reset his stance and attack again, but Maruboshi's grip was immensely powerful. I didn't know you were so scared that you didn't want to even look at my eyes. Maruboshi taunted with his eyes closed and a smirk on his face. Tachibana frowned, not having expected his own lines used against him, but he quickly thought of something else. I heard a quote some time ago. Oh. What did you hear? That in a profession where people die often, the old ones are a true treasure. You're praising me now. Want me to go easy on you? Make up your mind, you fool. Maruboshi said, pushing Tachibana away by gripping his hand and throwing him over his shoulder. But before his back could touch the ground, Tachibana performed a contorted shift to hijack Maruboshi's blind move by changing their center of mass. As soon as Tachibana's feet connected with the floor, he shot back as he used all his energy to jump and headbutt Maruboshi's chin. Unable to stop a literal head without permanently hurting Tachibana, Maruboshi moved back to create distance between them. You're not going to open your eyes, old man. What happened? Is it too painful? Maybe you should retire, you're too old to progress in ranks anyway. Tachibana said with a smile. As if I need to keep them open for a newbie like you. Even with my eyes closed, I need to hold back so that you don't begin crying like a baby. Don't want to bully a weak child, you see. Tachibana bit his tongue at the burn but refocused on the spar. With a strong push, Tachibana kicked up some dirt as he rushed in Maruboshi's direction. Maruboshi heard the push and tensed his muscles as he heard Tachibana take light steps towards him. A right uppercut, Maruboshi called out and dodged by simply leaning back a little. A left hook. Maruboshi said, redirecting the strike by pushing Tachibana's hand. A spinning kick from the left. Maruboshi called again, except this time as he braced himself for the kick from the left he suddenly shifted his supported elbow to the right. "Ooh, you're getting tricky," Maruboshi commented as he felt Tachibana's kick land on his hastily set up block. It was still blocked, but Maruboshi's hands tinged a little. "Is all you're good at defense? What happened to beating me so much that I'd cry?" Tachibana taunted calmly since he was unable to break through Maruboshi's defense. He wanted to find some sort of mistake in Maruboshi's moves to take advantage of it and defeat him. However, a 60-year-old veteran's battle-hardened moves seemed almost impossible to break. "Are you sure? Don't tell me that it hurts later. As if I'd cry about becoming stronger." "Stronger is it?" Maruboshi seemed to be reminiscing something, and then not even a moment later Tachibana felt a sudden premonition of danger and found himself flying backwards in the direction of the small pond in the training ground. Tachibana coughed up saliva as his breathing hitched while a stinging pain radiated outward from his chest. "I didn't even see that." Tachibana sent chakra to the soles of his feet and stopped himself from trying to drag his feet over the water. "Old man, what? Gonna cry about using ninjutsu in a taijutsu fight? I'm training you to be a shinobi, not a magician. When are you going to use all the tricks I taught you?" Maruboshi complained with his eyes closed and a smile on his face. Tachibana took a few deep breaths, courtesy of Maruboshi, who gave him enough time to recover from the devastating punch. Tachibana's eyes firmed and he looked at Maruboshi with all his focus. "Ooh, I can feel it. Bring it on," Maruboshi exclaimed as he taunted Tachibana with his hand. With a kickstart, Tachibana instantly ran towards Maruboshi, going to prove to him exactly why he was ready for the big missions. Tachibana increased his speed by using Chakra to give himself an extra spring in each step. His body flicker jutsu wasn't perfect, but he could still do this much. As soon as Tachibana reached Maruboshi this time, he started with a full body punch. Maruboshi blocked the punch, but his bones stung because of the force Tachibana used. Of course, Tachibana's own hands hurt quite a bit too. "I've got to bait him into a trap to capture him. But how do I trap him with the 3 basic academy ninjutsu?" Tachibana and Maruboshi exchanged a flurry of punches and blocks as Tachibana thought carefully about a plan, using his occasionally activating danger premonition to his advantage to drag out the fight. And within a few moments, Tachibana played his cards. Taking a step back, Tachibana quickly formed the 3 hand seals required for the clone jutsu, causing 2 identical clones to appear around him. "Oh, 2 clones. You caused so much noise to make them that I wanted to shut my ears. HMPF. If you were honorable you'd have shut your ears when you did with your eyes," Tachibana complained. "Getting feisty are we? Perhaps a beating is in order," Maruboshi said, but suddenly stopped in his tracks. There were 3 pairs of feet circling around him. He could obviously open his eyes and tell the difference between the clones, but Maruboshi didn't want to go back on his words. The 3 pairs of feet grew closer and closer as Tachibana spoke again. "Where am I?" "Here," one of the clones spoke. "Or here," another clone spoke. "Or am I nowhere?" Tachibana asked with a sly smile at his trap. At least you know how to use clones, so that's all right. But you forget a key difference." "A key difference? Which one?" a random clone asked. "Your clones cannot harm me." "Ha ha 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 ha, old man, are you saying you'll take on all of us at once and then react after you find the fakes?" "That is exactly what I'll do." Maruboshi smiled, taking on a serious stance as he waited for the imminent attack. All the clones eyed each other and smiled as they said, "We like those odds." The 3 bodies then rushed all at once towards Maruboshi, closing in on him while cocking back their fists to launch a devastating punch all at the same time. X3. Maruboshi, ready for their attacks, waited until he felt the air pressure from their attacks. Almost instantly, Maruboshi elbowed the clone in the back. Puff! The clone vanished before it could even land its blow. Then he punched the one on his left. Puff! And with a smile, Maruboshi extended his hand to capture the fist of the one of his right. But as soon as Maruboshi attempted to grab Tachibana's wrist and pin him down, there was a sudden puff as the grab failed. Maruboshi became a little stunned as his brows raised. Tachibana was incredibly happy that his plan had worked and he'd pulled it off. I knew I could time the substitution jutsu such that he'd think I'm a clone too. With a stealthy step, Tachibana, who'd just shifted in position with a log, brought his nail towards Maruboshi's neck, a smile on his face to show he'd won. Except out of nowhere, Maruboshi turned around to grip Tachibana's hand as he pulled him over his shoulder and tossed him into the dirt. Puff. This time the puff came not from Tachibana being a clone, but because he coughed up air as his chest was slammed into the ground. Maruboshi opened his eyes and looked at Tachibana on the ground, face first, eating dirt. You thought you could get me by confusing me with clones and a well-timed substitution jutsu. Tachibana with a frown complained, how do I defeat you if you can be that ridiculously fast? Isn't that just cheating? Ha 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 ha, you surely have a good sense of humor, you make this old man laugh. Ha, ha, ha. Tachibana laughed sarcastically, but then he felt his potion digest a little. System. Are you mocking me? Why did you digest the potion now? Which part of me looks like a clown right now? A melodic robotic voice sounded in his head in response. According to the system, the host digested the potion because even in a pitiful position, the host chooses to laugh and hide his sorrows behind a mask. Closing square bracket. Tisk. Finally, Tachibana let go of his loss and stood up with Maruboshi's help. I guess that isn't enough. Tachibana asked, looking at Maruboshi. Ha ha ha, did you really think you needed to win to go on a serious mission with me? Kids these days have begun making good jokes. As long as I deem you're qualified, you are. Tachibana's eyes shone and he looked at Maruboshi with anticipation. But I deem you unqualified, Maruboshi said, and caused Tachibana to deflate comically. What have you done, sensei? You've betrayed your only student. Tachibana voiced dramatically. But there's good news for you, Maruboshi said with a smile as Tachibana looked back at him with anticipation. I think it'll take you another week to become good enough and for me to declare you qualified. Tisk. Tachibana clicked his tongue and then paused for a second before asking, did you already confirm the mission for next week? Is that why you want me to wait a week? Because you can't prepone it. Maruboshi felt a slight tingle as he laughed away Tachibana's question and talked about something else. You didn't use the body flicker jutsu, why? I wasn't confident in using it while fighting you. I'd probably make some egregious mistake that you'd take advantage of and beat me even worse. I didn't want to break my nose just because you slammed me into the ground too hard. Maruboshi smiled and patted his shoulder, good job. Because if you did use it, I was planning on extending the week. You'd have to wait to a month. Tachibana's mouth hung as he looked at Maruboshi. You can't be serious. I'm serious. And this is something you must always know. Never use experimental techniques, not even if your life depends on it. Especially if your life depends on it. Make sure you always remember that. But what if I have no other options? Then you shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. While fighting you said old people in a profession where people who die young are treasures, right? Then think of this advice, something that I treasure very much. Tachibana nodded as he looked at the serious expression of his teacher, thinking back to his time as a seer. Before inviting a dangerous situation, always use divination to check the balance of your fate. That was how he walked from the capital to Konoha without encountering bandits or unsavory shinobi. With the warning done, Tachibana started to sneakily slip away from the training grounds since his body ached all over because Maruboshi wasn't holding back during the fight and he felt like he couldn't take any more training for today. Alas, he should have checked his fate before he arrived since Maruboshi easily placed his hand on Tachibana's shoulder, causing him to freeze in place. Where do you think you're going? We have several more spars to complete. Haha, I was just walking around to warm up. Brat, don't think I'm old enough to fall for your ponies. Tachibana sighed and turned around, complaining as he did so, then why did you hit me so hard? It feels like a single punch I take from you is equivalent to hitting the tree 100 times. Fine. If you don't want to spar, we'll do something different. Maruboshi conceded. Oh. And what's that? You've been introduced to taijutsu and ninjutsu, but not to bukijutsu yet. Let's train your shuriken and kunai throwing skills for now. Tachibana's eyes lit up as he heard this. If I can hit 100 shuriken and kunai in the center of the target, then can I go home? Maruboshi showed a slightly confused expression, but seeing Tachibana's spirit to train, he nodded, sure. Here, this scroll has shuriken and this one has kunai. There are about 50 in each. Tachibana grabbed the scroll and summoned a single shuriken. With a puff of smoke, the small but sharp shuriken appeared, one that required careful handling and care, otherwise it would cut anyone. Let's see if you even know how to hold O. Maruboshi started, but even before he could finish his sentence, Tachibana chucked away the shuriken like he was throwing a piece of trash. What are you do? Maruboshi shouted, but froze when he saw the shuriken Tachibana had thrown land on the target painted on the tree. It was a perfect bullseye. Ho! Maruboshi attempted to question, but in that time, Tachibana had summoned and thrown about 6 shuriken which all pierced the target at the same spot. The next few minutes were filled with Tachibana summoning shuriken and holding a comical posture like looking between his legs, with one leg raised, standing upside down, spinning on his head and standing on his fingers while throwing shuriken. Of course, all of them landed on the bullseye. How'd you do that? Maruboshi finally asked when Tachibana relaxed after finishing throwing all those shuriken and kunai. I've been practicing throwing things since my childhood. Tachibana lied as easily as breathing. I see. Maruboshi nodded. But he still couldn't believe how impressive Tachibana's throwing skills were. He's even better than most Uchiha I've seen using shuriken. With his quota of bukijutsu done, Tachibana made his way home uninterrupted to study seals with the extra time he had. I was getting to the interesting part yesterday but couldn't stay awake. I think I'll be able to make seals from now. Not anything advanced, but at least have paper except my chakra even if nothing happens. Walking back with groceries in his hand, Tachibana navigated the dense streets of Konoha, which were chock full of people running around to purchase various items. Most were civilians or retired shinobi. But there were also a few active shinobi visiting their favorable stores. As Tachibana walked the street with his ingredients slung in a bag around his shoulder, he suddenly heard a rather strange conversation over the crowd of people walking around. Are you ready for it? Yes. The plan's been set. All we have to do now is wait for sundown to steal the item. Tachibana's feet came to crawl so that he could listen to more of the conversation. What are they doing? Planning a heist in broad daylight. Tachibana traced the voice to the balcony of a dine-and-eat restaurant where 2 people sat across each other with a table between them. The bribes have been given. The shinobi in charge of patrol tonight will leave his post for 15 minutes. Only 15. Didn't we agree it would be 30? I'm sorry. This is the best I can do. Any more and we'll be attracting a lot of suspicion. There was a soft sigh before the man spoke once again. All right. I'll steal the scroll of seals within 15 minutes. Good. Remember, as long as you bring out the scroll of seals you'll be compensated appropriately. Their conversation ended with that, so Loki moved towards a nearby stall that was selling ice cream. He sat down on a bench facing the entrance of the restaurant. He wanted to see what the 2 shinobi who dared to plan a theft in broad daylight looked like. Aren't they afraid of someone eavesdropping on them? Not long after, a person dressed in casual clothes walked out of the restaurant. Activating his spirit vision by tapping his glabella twice, Tachibana clearly saw the man possessed a substantial amount of chakra. With the man leaving, and the other man still in the restaurant, Tachibana pulled out his pendulum to assess his odds of survival. Following the first man who left the restaurant is dangerous for me. With the pendulum rotating clockwise rapidly, Tachibana chose not to follow the man. He didn't wait for the second man either, since divining about him also revealed a similar result. They're at least a chunin or jonin if they pose such a threat to me. He wouldn't follow them, but instead of leaving, Tachibana entered the restaurant the 2 shinobi were in and moved to the balcony of the upper floor. There he came across a dustbin filled with tissues. Tachibana used a spoon to sort through the trash, quickly noticing a tissue on which were several details written. So they're going to execute the plan at 7:30. Loki assumed since he saw the number 7:30 written on it. A few other tissues also have things like the layout of the Hokage Tower and the location of the scroll of seals in it, so Tachibana collected them all and placed them in his pocket. Better inform Maruboshi-san about this. I'm sure he knows how to handle situations like this better. Tachibana dropped off his vegetables at his house and walked to Training Ground 7 to wait for Maruboshi to arrive before he noticed the white paper stuck to the tree stump he always sat on. There will be no training today. Since we're taking a mission tomorrow, today is a holiday for resting your mind and body. Tachibana looked at the short letter and frowned. This seems a little obvious, no? Is this a test for me? To see what I'd do in such a situation? Seeing how they don't want me to contact any authorities, it means they want me to solve this mess somehow. The Hokage is also probably using his telescopic crystal ball jutsu to spy on me. Tachibana closed his eyes and thought about the situation for a second. How can I catch two elite Chunin or Jonin shinobi? With no direct answer popping up, Tachibana walked back home. Once there he lay down on his bed and used cogitation to fall asleep after he muttered something 7 times. When will the shinobi from earlier attempt their plan to steal the Seal of Scrolls? A flash of scenes passed by before Tachibana was granted with a scene of one of the thieves looking at his watch. Tachibana looked at the watch and noted the time. 7:30. The dream shattered and Tachibana woke up but remained in the bed to pretend to be sleeping so that Hiruzen, who was probably looking at him through the telescope jutsu, wouldn't be suspicious of his abilities. So I have to be prepared for 7:30 today. Tachibana lay in the bed, thinking of a plan. Meanwhile, Hiruzen, looking through his telescope jutsu, was a little confused. How is he so relaxed about the shinobi trying to infiltrate the Hokage office? How can he sleep in such a situation? But he hasn't done anything terribly wrong yet. He properly eavesdropped on the shinobi making a plan in public to gather intelligence, did not follow them since he is much weaker than them, and also gathered evidence by visiting the place they were last at. He even looked for a higher up when he realized this was out of his hand. But why did he suddenly choose to sleep? He might have realized this as a test, but why sleep instead of focusing on making a plan? Tachibana woke up after a few hours feeling refreshed. He'd thought about the plan to capture the two shinobi for a few minutes but genuinely fell asleep after a while. I have a nice plan now. Let's see if this helps me pass their test or not. Walking out of the bedroom, Tachibana selected all the ingredients he needed to cook a meal. He finished it all in a few minutes and then had a lavish lunch. Afterwards, he spent time practicing the 3 Academy ninjutsu to make himself even more proficient in making clones and transfigurations indistinguishable from reality to the naked eye. Time passed swiftly and Tachibana put on makeup to make himself look like a clown. Hiruzen started monitoring Tachibana again and was startled by his appearance. Why the makeup? Why does he want to look like a clown? With his makeup ready along with his weapons to take down the shinobi, Tachibana stepped out of his house and used parkour to climb the houses and find a suitable spot to mount an attack when it was time to capture the shinobi. Tachibana used spirit vision to hide from any patrolling teams as he hid on one of the roofs near the Hokage Tower. Not long after that, one of the shinobi he'd seen earlier arrived. The area around them was empty, without a single soul present anywhere around them in close to 100 meters, except the Hokage. With a flick of his hand, Tachibana threw a bunch of shuriken at the shinobi right as he entered the Hokage Tower. Normally he wouldn't have waited for the shinobi to enter the tower to attack, but he'd attached something special to the shuriken he'd thrown and it worked best in spots without wind. The Hokage Tower where the shinobi would retreat was a fantastic place for his attack to explode. Ting asterisk ting asterisk ting asterisk ting. The shinobi immediately protected himself by knocking the shuriken away, but unfortunately for him, as he entered the Hokage Tower to take cover, the shuriken exploded one by one. Bang asterisk bang asterisk bang asterisk bang. Tachibana smiled seeing his plan succeed. He calmly descended the building he was standing on top of while listening to the screams of the shinobi who was blinded. Cough 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 cough. It burnsss. The shinobi collapsed to his knees, allowing Tachibana to calmly walk over to him and place his kunai on the man's neck. I'm done. Is this enough? Or do you want me to? Tachibana shouted, but someone else interrupted him. That's all right, Tachibana-kun. But what did you do to the shinobi? It was a hurried voice that came from the street. As the man walked into the light of the Hokage tower, he was clear for everyone to see. Chili powder. Hiruzen's muscles tensed as he looked at the shinobi who was already rushing to create water using his chakra to wash out his eyes. Did you attach a bag of them to your shuriken? Hiruzen asked, looking at the deflected shuriken that were embedded into the floor. Tachibana nodded. I'm sorry, Shinobi-san. I just did what my sensei told me to do. Maruboshi taught you this? Hiruzen asked with surprise. Yes. Maruboshi-sensei told me to use methods that I know will work without doubt and not experimental techniques. Hiruzen gave a wry smile. I don't think he meant for you to douse your enemy in a chili powder. And I sensed that the shinobi I came across were quite powerful. So instead of taking him down in a fight which I probably would have lost, I decided to take advantage of them not knowing what I could pull off to catch them off guard. Hiruzen smiled with a sagely look and nodded. Indeed, the first step to becoming a shinobi is to never let the enemy know your next move. Being unpredictable helps you to trap your enemies in your trap quite easily. But wasn't this a little too obvious as a test? Tachibana asked with some confusion. Ah, well, Hiruzen with shifty eyes thought of the best reason he could come up with. It's not like I can outright tell him I was supposed to save him when he was cornered while fighting the shinobi. What can I? Your ability to see if you recognized you were being tested was also a part of the test. Hiruzen explained with a happy smile. And you passed that too. Now all I need to do is divert him and he'll stop thinking about this. I guess doing things this way wouldn't be much different from doing it the other way if I do it right. And for passing the test I set up for you, I have a reward for you. Here, Hiruzen said, pulling off his shinobi forehead protector and handing it over to Tachibana. Tachibana's eyes widened as he looked at what Hiruzen was offering him. This, I'm afraid I cannot accept this, Hokage-sama. It must be very precious to you. Hiruzen only smiled as he spoke. A gust of wind blew by, causing his hair to flutter as he spoke. To me this forehead protector signifies my teacher passing me the star-like will of fire that burnt in his heart. And now, I pass it on to you. So that through all that Konoha may go through in the future, you will be there as a silent guardian to protect it. Tachibana's expression turned into one an awestruck teenager would have if they ever saw their heroes in real life. He solemnly took hold of the badge and tied it around his own forehead. Then with a smile, he spoke, I shall honor your will of fire by making it burn brighter than even the brightest star in the future. Good. Hiruzen said, allowing Tachibana to go home. As Tachibana walked away, his thoughts remained hidden in his mind. This thing is so sticky. Is it his sweat? Ew, I'll wash it well later. So during the test, I was probably supposed to be cornered by the shinobi after confronting him. Then Hiruzen would probably come out to save me and out of the goodness in his heart give me a forehead protector because I saved the village's secrets by helping stop the bad shinobi by putting my life on the line. He'd probably still give me the will of fire speech, and then once he was satisfied he'd allow me to go home. Manipulation at its finest, but it's not like I don't understand why he's doing it. Konoha is a militaristic state. Questioning orders would be bad for the higher-ups. Reaching home, Tachibana cleaned himself and crashed into his bed. He called out the system in his mind to look at his status. Digestion, 49%. I need to digest my potion quicker. Although the Konoha Crush plan doesn't concern me, the village will probably be attacked, and during that time I'd feel safer if I was a sequence 7 or even 6. I'd have enough of a physical enhancement that I'd be comfortable at that point. Recognizing the host's desire to grow stronger. Closing square bracket. Generating an appropriate mission to help the host grow stronger. Closing square bracket. Mission generated. Would the host like to see the mission? Closing square bracket. Mission. This is the first mission the system's giving me. What's so special about the situation that you decided to give me a mission right now? I wished to grow stronger even back when I first got you. Why didn't you give me a mission then? The host received a gift from the system in the form of a novice starter pack which was deemed sufficient. The system generated a mission now because it cannot gift something else to the host without him working for it. Closing square bracket. You're calling me a leech, aren't you? Would the host not like to see the mission? Closing square bracket. Okay, show me what the mission is. Mission. The host must make a bandit laugh at your jokes. Closing square bracket. Is that all? Tachibana asked with little enthusiasm. The host is being greedy about rewards, but since the system is forced to work for the host's betterment, it shall provide the host with an enticing reason to complete this mission. Closing square bracket. Rewards. Slumber charm. A charm blessed by the goddess of Evernight and can put even a veteran shinobi of the cage level to sleep for a few seconds. Closing square bracket. Tachibana's mouth hung as he looked at the reward. Seriously. The system does not make jokes. The system is not the one acting as a clown. Closing square bracket. Tachibana ignored the system's jab at him and became focused on the rewards. In the battle of shinobi where each moment can decide who lives and who dies, such a charm can turn the tides of battle very easily. I guess when Maruboshi-sensei takes me on missions, I'll be doing something rather silly. I hope I can come up with an excuse to perform such a silly act too. Perhaps I can infiltrate their ranks by pretending to be a wandering clown who wants to earn some coin by performing for the bandit group. This way, after they're done clapping and laughing for me, I can just complete the mission of the system and of a shinobi by slaughtering them. Sometimes my genius frightens even me. Tachibana looked at the special scroll in front of him. He'd purchased this scroll while purchasing ingredients today. It varied from a normal scroll because the paper was substantially thicker and could hold liquids without tearing. Although this special scroll was used for calligraphy and painting, Tachibana had bought it to practice sealing jutsus. Dipping the brush into an oil-based ink, Tachibana carefully drew on it a complicated set of brush strokes using the sealing book as a reference. Before each brush stroke, Tachibana would perform a hand sign and with some difficulty mold chakra to give it a property after it passed through a tenketsu. As he drew the stroke, Tachibana would imbue this chakra into the ink so that the stroke held the same properties. Soon Tachibana stopped and checked his work. Alright, they look the same. Now all I have to do is pour chakra into the thing and see if it works. Once the ink dried, Tachibana brought his hand closer to the paper and using the tenketsu on his palm he poured in a little bit of his chakra into the paper. Initially, there was no resistance and chakra flowed freely into the paper, but after just a few seconds Tachibana felt it became rather difficult to push in more chakra. Soon he couldn't push in anymore. There was no visual change in the paper at first, but it soon started to get warmer and suddenly burst into flames. So it worked. Sealing, although a complicated system with several rules and regulations, could be distilled into simple words that captured its essence well. Sealing is the art of mimicking chakra pathways externally. This simple technique has several uses. For example, a good seal master who knew a high-level jutsu could create a seal that when activated could execute the jutsu even if the person using it didn't know that jutsu. Although that was a great use for it since it meant even the lowest ranked shinobi could perform the highest ranked jutsu if they had enough chakra, but that wasn't all. A good seal master could use seals to experiment and create new jutsu that would otherwise be very dangerous for them to directly try on themselves. But even that wasn't the end. Sealing could be used to append extra chakra pathways to a person with a specific effect so that the time it took to mold chakra for complicated jutsu became much smaller. Although a shinobi could use any jutsu with a paper seal, it was limited since it was a one-time use paper seal. Extending a person's chakra pathways by adding a seal onto their body, however, allowed the seal to become reusable. This meant a shinobi with good chakra control could spam a jutsu as long as they had enough chakra. This method was also the basis of many mind control seals and chakra suppression seals. I can understand why everyone feared the Uzumaki clan now. So much so that it took several shinobi villages to join hands to defeat them. But this one fight probably set back humanity by quite a bit. What a disappointment. At least I can revive it all. Tachibana thought with a resolute look in his eyes as he thought about all the books on sealing in the secret room. Tachibana had become extremely careful about practicing sealing and even reading the book about it. He'd used divination to make sure no one was spying on him or would spy on him soon before pulling out the book from under his bed. He didn't want Hiruzen barging into his house one day and claiming that all the books were village property and he needed enough contributions just to see them again. I don't know why you left these books behind, Mito-sama, but I'll make sure they find the best use ever. I only have to keep Hiruzen away from these books for about 4 months, and after that, he'll be gone. Tsunade won't use that crystal ball, right? Although the seal that Tachibana had drawn had burst into flames earlier, Tachibana didn't know if he had any fire affinity. The only reason he was able to make the seal burst into flames was because Mito's book explained that there was a pathway in the body that had the property to heat the chakra that passed through it. It was used by several shinobi to start fires when they were camping or to burn explosive tags. I should get a chakra paper to test what affinities I have so that I can train them before I get into learning elemental jutsu too. I'll ask Maruboshi sensei about it later. With his test done, Tachibana hid the book before going to sleep. Tomorrow was a big day. After all, he'd leave the village on his first, real, shinobi mission. Waking up the next morning, Tachibana freshened himself and had a heavy breakfast before leaving for the Hokage tower. "Good morning, sensei," Tachibana said with a smile as he flicked his forehead protector to show Maruboshi what he had on his head. "Good morning, my dearest student. I see you have a new addition to your attire. Hee, I look great, don't I?" "You do. I heard what you did," Maruboshi said, placing his hand on Loki's shoulder and squeezing a little hard. "When did I tell you to use chili powder to attack shinobi?" Hee, I mean, didn't you say I should only use tactics that I'm sure would work? So I did just that. You can't complain about that." Maruboshi shook his head and walked into the Hokage office along with Tachibana. "Let's take our mission." "Sure. I've never been more ready in my entire life. We'll see." A while later, when it was their turn, Maruboshi and Tachibana stepped into the mission delegation room. The Hokage was sitting in his official robes along with a few chunin on both his sides. One of whom Tachibana recognized because of the scar on his nose. "Is that Iruka sensei?" Hiruzen's eyes lit up as soon as he saw Tachibana and Maruboshi. "Greetings, Hokage-sama," Tachibana said with a smile, to which the Hokage nodded back, puzzling all the other shinobi about who the child was to talk so casually to their Hokage. Iruka was the most puzzled since he didn't remember any kid like Tachibana in the academy. Especially since Maruboshi was leading the kid when everyone knew he was the eternal genin of Konoha. "I have just the right mission for you, Tachibana-kun. It's a bandit suppression mission from a village on the way to the capital from Konoha. It would be the best for you to choose this mission." Tachibana nodded and Maruboshi took the scroll from Hiruzen with a polite bow. "Good luck on your first mission, Tachibana-kun." "Thank you, Hokage-sama, I will keep the village's name held high." When the two left the room, Iruka turned toward Hiruzen and asked him a question. "Hokage-sama, if I may ask, who was the boy? He looked as young as Naruto, but I've never seen him in the academy before." Hiruzen laughed softly before taking a puff of smoke from his smoking pipe. Breathing out the smoke from his nose, Hiruzen spoke with a smile. "His identity is a secret for now. But treat him the same as any other shinobi that's a part of the village. He's a good kid." Maruboshi and Tachibana, having already packed the essentials, left the village immediately, showing their mission ticket to the guards to take note of before leaving towards the village that had sent the mission. If you keep up that speed, I'll reach the village, you Maruboshi-sensei. Tachibana said as he ran ahead. As if I'll let you. Maruboshi shouted before using the body flicker jutsu to cross Tachibana. That's cheating. Tachibana gasped as he leaned on his knees and looked accusingly at Maruboshi. Haha. Do you have such little energy? I thought you admired Hashirama. Hashirama was said to make jutsus that were 1,000 feet tall when he fought Madara. Tachibana with a sweet smile spoke calmly, I see. Thank you for teaching me just how useless you are. So old and can't even produce a jutsu that's 100 feet high. Gak. An arrow pierced Maruboshi's heart as he became rooted to the spot with Tachibana walking ahead of him and into the village they had to protect. Halt. The village guard said, holding Tachibana back. I'm here for the quest that the village posted. To defeat the bandits and bring back the children who've been kidnapped. The guard was startled for a second, but he quickly recovered and held his hand out. Could I please see your identification papers, Shinobi-san? Tachibana nodded and turned to Maruboshi, who'd arrived beside him at some point. Maruboshi pulled out a neatly folded paper and handed it to the guard, who looked at the pictures in it and then at Tachibana and Maruboshi before nodding thankfully. I hope you're able to help us with this soon. Several families in the village have become despondent since their children have been taken. The village has become as silent as a graveyard, the guard said politely, bowing deeply. Tachibana nodded while Maruboshi patted the guard's shoulder before they entered the village. The village head's house was the largest one and they immediately spotted it, making their way towards it as several curious onlookers peered through their windows to see who'd arrived in their village. But as soon as Tachibana or Maruboshi looked at them, they closed the window or drew curtains to break their line of sight. They're pretty afraid. Knock knock. Maruboshi knocked on the door, making them wait for only a few seconds before an old man opened it from the inside. The man's gaze was confused for a few seconds until his eyes fell on the Konoha forehead protectors on both their heads, which caused his eyes to light up as he smiled and called them inside. Please come in. In the rather wide room, the village head sat on one side of the table while Tachibana and Maruboshi sat on the other. If you can explain to us exactly what happened, we can help solve your problem faster, Maruboshi asked, taking the lead to ask questions. The village head nodded and explained, about 3 weeks ago, one of our children went missing during the evening while he was out with the other kids. Initially, we assumed the worst. Perhaps, the child was taken by the wild animals in the forest. Then, how did you find out about the bandits? It wasn't until 2 weeks ago when another kid was being taken away that the villagers heard his screams. We rushed to the source of the sound and managed to catch a view of the bandits as they were carrying our boy towards the forest. Maruboshi thought for a few seconds before asking, how many bandits were there? We saw only 3 when they came to take away our children initially, and each time the bandits we saw were different. But recently there have been many more bandits. In yesterday's attack, we spotted about 7 bandits. And how many children did they take? Yesterday it was 5, in all, it is 15. The village head spoke with red eyes. The bandits were all powerful and could use the sword very well. They even injured one of our guards, he's unconscious even today. Tachibana frowned at the information as his mind wandered. Are those kids even around anymore? Or were they sold away? But why would the bandits come here in a small group to take a few children away each time? Why not come with a big group and take them all away at once? That was when the village head continued speaking. The bandits know that we don't have enough money to hire shinobi from the village. The money for this mission was obtained by pooling everyone's resources. And even then we could only afford a low C rank mission. The village head then placed his head on the floor and spoke earnestly, in a gut-wrenching tone, please Shinobi-san, we don't have much else apart from our next generation. Please bring back our children. Maruboshi sighed but then nodded, it's all right. Let us finish our work, make sure that you don't let anyone else from the village wander around and interfere or cause problems in the mission. The village head nodded with fervor and escorted Tachibana and Maruboshi to the spot in the forest where they'd seen the bandits. Once they reached the spot, the village head was asked to return as Maruboshi studied the tracks the bandits left behind. Their tracks are plenty. It doesn't seem like they're shinobi. They're probably just bandits who picked up how to use the sword on their own. Maruboshi concluded. However, after his short explanation, Maruboshi never heard Tachibana speak, so he looked at him. Tachibana's eyes were rolled back in his head as he used cogitation while mumbling something under his breath. The people who left these tracks behind are simple bandits. After muttering the statement 7 times, Tachibana opened his eyes and looked at the pendulum in his hand that was spinning counterclockwise. They weren't simply bandits. They might not be shinobi but were likely trained by someone in the way of the sword. Could they be expelled samurai from the land of iron? Tachibana asked. Maruboshi frowned a little as he looked at Tachibana and then he said, I thought I told you not to trust things that are experimental. Tachibana shook his head and calmly explained, I trust my divination. It isn't experimental at all. Maruboshi remained frowning for a few seconds before he said, fine. Let's do it your way then. Let's follow these tracks and see if the people we're fighting against are really people from the land of iron or just bandits. Tachibana shrugged, sure. Maruboshi and Tachibana followed the tracks for the better part of the day and ended up at a cliff that overlooked a short valley in the evening when the sun was about to set. In the valley were several bandits drinking and sitting around a fire while in plain view were young children trapped in a cage. Tachibana and Maruboshi could only count about 10 children, which meant that 5 of them had already been sold. Finally, Maruboshi said, irrespective of if they're bandits or samurais, they've got the children in a cage. That means we can't fight them head on since they'll use them as hostages. You want me to distract them so you can free up the children and then we fight them. You read my mind. But what if they're trained samurai? Wouldn't I be defeated rather easily? Maruboshi frowned. It's hard for samurai to have come all the way from the land of iron to the land of fire undetected. I don't know how they came here. But I'm sure they're not simple bandits. Maruboshi stayed silent for a while before pulling out a storage seal from his pouch. In this are 7 smoke bombs, you can use it at your discretion. It should keep you safe for long enough until I'll be around to help you. Tachibana nodded and said with a little glee, thanks sensei. I knew you'd believe me. I don't believe you. Maruboshi stated plainly. Tachibana only rolled his eyes and pulled out his makeup kit to paint himself like a clown. What are you doing? Maruboshi asked with some confusion. You wanted me to distract them, right? Just watch. Tachibana quickly finished his makeup, hit his forehead protector and walked down towards the camp of bandits. The bushes around the camp shook, causing the bandits on guard to become a little alert. They slightly pushed open their swords out of their scabbards, waiting for even the slightest hint of an attack to parry it. One of the guards was about to walk over to check the bush in an attempt to investigate, but right at that moment the bush shook again and a man stepped out of it. BWWAAAAAHHHH, so many webs. The bandits immediately pulled out their swords but froze halfway through. A clown. One of them mumbled. The man who was dusting away the long grass stalks from his dress and hair looked up at the guard who said that. Oh, you recognize me? Yes. I am a clown. A bona fide one at that. Would you believe me if I said there's no better clown than me in the world? I'll tell you a joke to prove it. Do you know what the Hokage said to the? Who are you? Why are you here? The other guard interrupted the dialogue spree that the clown had gone on. Ah, I'm a wandering clown. Like you, wait, no. I don't mean you're a clown. I meant I was wandering from place to place like you. The guards put up an unwilling expression, but seeing the man's unarmed and unguarded demeanor they were willing to give him a chance and hear him out. I'm a wandering clown. I go around from place to place to share my jokes and tales. For coin, of course. The clown said, making a circle with his thumb and index finger. May I entertain you? You'd love it, I promise. My usual audience loves me. I mean, aren't you bored? In this valley, all alone. The guards looked at each other and shared a knowing glance before one of them left to go deeper into the camp. Meanwhile, the other guard stared at the clown with a frown. So Tachibana asked, here's a joke while we wait. What did the Hokage say to the shinobi that was on fire? Tachibana paused for dramatic effect, and when the guard showed a thoughtful look he revealed by taking a dramatic posture, pretending to hold a smoking pipe and eyes that stared off into the distance. The will of fire burns strong within this one. Tachibana laughed at his own joke, but throughout the interaction, he paid attention to the guard, and to his surprise he saw the guard had a little smile of his own, even though he did his best to hide it in. I guess everyone knows about the will of the fire. That was when Tachibana heard a series of footsteps and out emerged the guard who'd gone in. You're lucky. Najinaga-sama asks to see you. Tachibana's eyes shone and he looked at the guards who were ready to escort him in. Follow us. As Tachibana walked through the camp he noticed a large number of patrols all around the camp, which made it difficult to break into. His eyes also fell on the children in the cages, their eyes hollow, as if they'd lost all hope. A few were even missing teeth and had bruised faces. With the last rays of light sinking in, the valley was drowned in darkness, and Tachibana finally reached the entrance of the tent where Najinaga-sama was. As soon as Tachibana entered the tent he felt a cold gaze evaluate him. His eyes adjusted to the darkness illuminated only by a single lamp and spotted the large man sitting on an equally large bamboo chair. He wore a kimono that only covered his bottom half. A large katana was tied to his waist, his armor hung on one of the poles holding the tent. He sat with one hand on the handle of his bamboo chair with his head resting on it while the other hand was free to contemplate the mysteries of life. This is him, Najinaga-sama. He said he was a clown and hoped to earn coin by entertaining us. Tachibana felt the man's eyes shift from the guard who spoke to himself, and so he introduced himself a little more elaborately. A deck of cards appeared on his hand as if an illusion, and Tachibana fanned himself while speaking. I'm the fool that does not belong to this era. The wandering clown that humors traders. And the magician that performs for an audience. Nice to meet you, Najinaga-sama. Tachibana bowed deeply and waited for the man to speak. The cold gaze he was feeling bore into his back for a while before the man spoke with a deep voice. Magic. Ninjutsu. No, my lord. Do not sully the arts of my hand by the silly finger bending of the shinobi villages. Would you allow me to demonstrate? Tachibana said, looking directly at the man. The man nodded. Tachibana immediately moved closer to the man, but the guard almost instinctively unsheathed his sword and placed it on his neck. Tachibana only looked at Najinaga, uncaring about the sword on his neck. The man waved his hand and the guard sheathed his sword with an apology. Tachibana stepped closer unhindered, pulling out the stack of cards as he fanned them. Please choose a card. Don't show it to me. The robust man looked a little interested. He used his free hand to pull out a card and looked at it. Once he was satisfied he looked back at Tachibana. Good job memorizing your card. Now I'll shuffle the deck. You tell me when to stop. Tachibana did exactly as he'd said, and suddenly the man said, stop, in a boorish tone. Tachibana diligently stopped and cut the deck in two. May I take your card, Najinaga-sama? The man placed his card into Tachibana's deck and he shuffled it all once again. Now, do you agree that everything you did was of your own volition? The man thought for a bit but nodded. So is this your card? Tachibana pulled out the topmost card of the deck and asked with a smile. Najinaga looked at the card with a little expectation, but when his eyes actually fell on the card he became a little disappointed. Fit, not it right. Tachibana joked, but Najinaga's eyes only became harder. How can I guess your card so randomly? I'm not a saint or a seer, am I? Tachibana suddenly threw all his cards into the air, creating a shower of cards. And in this shower, Tachibana moved closer to Najinaga and pushed out his chest. Reach into my pocket and pull out the piece of paper in there. The guards were startled momentarily by this act but relaxed when they saw Tachibana didn't intend to attack. Najinaga looked with a little distrust, but Tachibana only egged him on. I made this prediction in the morning before I'd even decided I'd come here. Is it right? Hearing those words, Najinaga decided to entertain Tachibana's one last request. He reached into his chest pocket and pulled out a paper. The paper was folded several times over, so he had to work with his hard stubby fingers to unfold it a little, but within a few seconds when the paper unfolded, Najinaga became a little stunned. It's correct, isn't it? Tachibana said with his arms crossed and some pride in his voice. Now get a shinobi to do that. All agree that they're good at magic. This takes real skill to do. Unlike those wishy-washy fools who only know how to walk upside down on trees. Naginaga's eyes showed a semblance of admiration towards Tachibana as he spoke again. Real skill can only be trained from childhood and comes with repeated practice. Exactly. As if those shinobi that only sit back and allow the real men to fight with cold blades would understand the thrill of doing something with their own bodies. Naginaga's eyes lit up further, to a degree that he stopped leaning on his hand and sat up straight. Yes. There was a soft silence for a few moments, and as if deciding something within those moments, Naginaga turned towards the guard. Gather everyone in the camp here. Tell them Naginaga has invited a friend. The guard gulped, looking at Tachibana like he was a ghost, and immediately rushed out after bowing to Naginaga, who was now smiling. Mentally, Tachibana smiled as he asked the system a question. System, why did I suddenly digest 20% of my clown potion? The host has suddenly digested 20% of the potion because he acted as a clown in front of a very powerful target. Closing square bracket. What? So if I do my acting in front of a powerful person, do I get more feedback for digestion? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Because the system thought the host was intelligent enough to know about it. Closing square bracket. But in Lotm, better digestion only comes from higher sequences, and why then did I not get more digestion feedback when my dad, the literal daimyo, was involved? Because the daimyo is not powerful. Closing square bracket. So only shinobi powerful counts. No money or political strength. Yes. Closing square bracket. Sigh, I guess I have to keep showing off in front of everyone to grow stronger. But how will I stop them from investigating my weird jutsus? Do I leave no witnesses behind? Or somehow develop strange jutsus that are possible while hiding my Byander abilities among them? Tachibana stood on the backrest of a chair on his big toe as he pretended to be shaking while holding a bunch of cards. Everyone's eyes traced Tachibana's incredible figure as he balanced on the chair. Flipping out a single card from his deck, Tachibana caught it and aimed it right at the bandit, who was standing about 30 feet away with an apple in his mouth, in his hands, in his elbows, on his knees, on his head, and under his feet. All right, everyone. You know what to do. All of a sudden the bandits grew serious. Naginaga opened his mouth and started to lead everyone. It's about drive. It's about power. We stay hungry, we devour. Tachibana closed his eyes and pretended he was feeling something course through his veins as he suddenly opened them and started a rapid fire of cards that started to bolt the apple that was in the mouth of the unlucky bandit who had been chosen. Flick. With the final card flying out of Tachibana's hands, everyone watched carefully as it flew through the air and caused the apple that was being abused to explode, sending showers of pulp all around the crowd. The bandits roared, including Naginata. Tachibana bowed to the crowd and jumped off the chair in a backflip as he landed in front of everyone in a superhero pose. How was that? Tachibana asked with a smile as he pulled out a hat from his pocket and walked around the crowd, earning donations along with claps. What's taking Maruboshi so long? Did he get caught or something? Maybe he fell asleep. Tachibana was a little worried, but he maintained a smile on his face as he asked the system a question. System, how much has my potion digested? Why hasn't it fully digested it yet? The host never ended his current act to start a new act, so Naginaga hasn't given any extra digestion points. Closing square bracket. Damn. Then how much have all the other people given? 20%. The host has currently digested 89% of the potion. Closing square bracket. Alright, it's not that bad. What do I do next? I've been through magic, card throwing, physical humor, maybe divination. Tachibana raised his hands and quietened the crowd of samurai bandits that was going wild. Now, I want to share something very special with you. Tachibana explained calmly. His words got even Naginaga sitting on the edge of his seat as he hung on every word. What do you think the odds are when betting on a coin flip? Tachibana asked, Everyone in the crowd went silent for a few seconds before one of the bandits spoke up, 50-50. Exactly. Does everyone think so? A lot of the bandits nodded while the others tried to peer through to see if there was any trick in Tachibana's words, but finding none they relented. Alright then. For the price of all the Ryo you've given me tonight. Who'd like to bet with me on a few coin flips? Everyone's eyes immediately widened with greed as they eyed the stash of coins and notes Tachibana had pulled out of his pocket. Several of them immediately raised their hands and shouted to be chosen, but after Najinaga raised his hand they all settled. Tachibana immediately jumped at the opportunity to bring their blood pumping. Najinaga-sama has volunteered. Let's see whose luck is better. The great commander, or a wandering clown. Najinaga looked at Tachibana and then at everyone in the crowd, seeing they were all looking at him with anticipation, causing him to break out into a smile and stand up from his bamboo chair. All right. Najinaga nodded, causing the bandits to cheer for him. When Najinaga was in front of Tachibana, he pulled out a coin from Najinaga's hands using sleight of hand, causing a few chuckles to break out. Even Najinaga was smiling. Tachibana closed his eyes and in front of everyone let his topaz pendulum hang. Using cogitation he entered a sleep-like state as he murmured clearly enough for everyone to understand, the result of the coming coin toss will be tails. Muttering the statement 7 times, Tachibana opened his eyes and saw the pendulum turning clockwise, so he spoke clearly, I'm choosing tails. What about you? Najinaga looked at the pendulum for a few seconds before speaking calmly, heads. Are you ready? Tachibana asked the crowd of bandits who cheered and then Najinaga, who just grunted. With a sharp flick Tachibana sent the coin for a toss. Except since everyone's eyes were focused on the coin toss, no one noticed the fire signal behind them in the trees. Tachibana only noticed it because he was directly in front of it and it was in his line of sight. Get ready. So Maruboshi's done with rescuing the kids. How's he planning to kill Najinaga? Although not as powerful as Maruboshi, he feels quite strong. The coin flipped a few more times until Tachibana slapped it on the table as it landed with a thud. What do you think, Naganaga-sama? I win. Or did you win? Najinaga looked at Tachibana's hands for a while as his brows furrowed hard in concentration, but then he said, it's heads. Tachibana opened his hand and revealed the result to everyone, tails. Najinaga gave a grunt, looked at Tachibana and spoke with some annoyance, again. Tachibana complied, performing the divination in front of everyone and betting on tails once again. The coin was flipped and when Tachibana looked at the tree this time he found no one there. Tachibana slapped the coin on the table and asked the same question again, what do you think? Was that just beginner's luck? Or do I have a trick up my sleeve? I win. Najinaga said with a smile, except when Tachibana revealed the coin he became dumbfounded. It's tails again. Najinaga's brows furrowed as the rest of the bandits cheered. Wanna toss the coin yourself this time? Just to make sure I'm not tricking you? Tachibana asked, offering the coin to Najinaga while also coming up with a plan. Najinaga took the coin and placed it on his thumb before looking at Tachibana, make your bet. Tachibana nodded and performed another divination before choosing, heads. Najinaga's brows furrowed but he didn't change Tachibana's decision and chose, tails, instead. Flick. The coin was flipped and everyone's eyes remained fixed on the shiny piece of metal floating in the air. Because of Najinaga's strength, the coin went a little higher. However, as soon as Najinaga heard the faint clink of metal he looked at Tachibana. There was a kunai in Tachibana's hand moving right at his neck. Najinaga's brows furrowed before his eyes turned red with anger. Almost instantly Najinaga's body moved backward to dodge the kunai while his hand moved to grip Tachibana's head like a melon and squish him to death. But to Tachibana's great luck, his danger senses activated in advance, giving him a vision of exactly this happening, allowing him to evade it in time. Tachibana ducked even before Najinaga's hands started to move. The kunai in Tachibana's hands that was aiming at Najinaga's neck moved lower with the duck and pierced his left lung instead of his throat. Poochie. Tachibana flipped backwards and created distance between the two while Naginata stood enraged. There was silence for a second as everyone was looking at Tachibana to announce the result but became confused when they saw him move away from the table. They couldn't see the kunai stabbed into Naginata's left lung since he stood with his back to them, so the coin landed on the table, breaking the silence. Tachibana and Naginaga both looked at the coin. Tachibana looked up at Naginaga and gave him an innocent smile. It's heads. Naginaga screamed in pain and punched his hand through the table, sending splinters everywhere as he walked through the debris right towards Tachibana. His hand rested on the sword on his waist and pulled it out with a swing. Alright, I guess it's time to fight. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.